Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the regular council meeting to order. Mayor Davey.
Here.
Councilmember Laredo.
Here.
Councilmember London. Here. Councilmember Vice Mayor McCormick. Here. Councilmember Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
And Councilmember Segurola.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mayor. If you may please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, Mayor, is brief comments by council.
I have one. Friday night we had the screening of The Bridge, which is a movie that's through the Chief Press Foundation with our sister city, Liberty City, our sister community. I have to say I was there, the manager was there, Vice Mayor was there. It was really powerful. I thought it was a great thing to see. I want to thank the chief for everything he does to remind, it was great to actually be reminded of how much Chief Press does for this community and how much we get out of it as a community. And thank you to everybody who is a part of it. Thank you to everybody in this community that does what they do. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, Chief, and thank you to everybody that helped put that together, Don and Nancy Ellisberg and everybody else. So thank you. And that's my brief comment. Anybody else? Okay.
Next item, Mayor, is approval, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, withdrawal.
Okay, I've got two items. Ultra, and then I want to talk about the use of single-use plastics on Key Biscayne. Michael?
That will be item 11A3 and 11A4.
Okay. And then Vice Mayor?
I'd like to add a council discussion item about the address verification position at MAST.
Address verification. Brett?
I have zoning ordinance review.
That's 6. Councilmember London?
Underground electric.
Underground electric.
Mayor,
Katie?
I'd like to,
I'm sorry.
if I may, move the manager's report to be discussed at the same time as
Well, I
the
was going to
other
suggest that once I get everybody online.
Okay.
Yeah, that's Katie. Councilmember Petros?
Okay, I have 3 actually. Our website, the Parks and Open Space Board, and the texting while driving legislation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Segurola?
I'd like to add as a discussion item, all interrelated, Vision 2020 Landscaping Plan, Village Landscaping Code, and Village Horticulturalist.
We just say landscaping generally as one item.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Laredo?
About moving items or new
Do you
items?
have any items to add?
I'd like to, I don't know if it's been done, but to move the manager's report 11D up front only so that we tend to maybe discuss who's in charge of the agenda, how it gets put together, because
11D.
it would be 11D, but it's so important that we have it early while people are engaged. We usually get it at the end of
it's
very long evening.
We have to do it by 9 o'clock. I think we can move it up the whole thing, or do you want to do?
Yeah, the whole thing, so the report is, that's okay with you.
I mean, I think the undergrounding has to move up, certainly. I don't have a problem with it. Where would you recommend we put it?
Earlier, not only today, but I think we discussed this the last time, that we need to really break up who puts the agenda together. Seems to be very important stuff. She runs the city on our behalf and the citizens, and we wind up doing it unintentionally at the end of a long evening. So if we can move it up today and henceforth, we'll be more fresh.
Might I make a suggestion
Please.
to possibly swap it out with the consent agenda? Because if anything is on consent, it will presumably.
Is it okay if I hear it no later than
8 o'clock?
8 o'clock, 7 o'clock?
Yeah, just make an earlier
Yeah,
time.
let's make it no later
Right.
than 8 o'clock. Fine, let's move it to
Okay.
no later than 8 o'clock. So to the manager's point about undergrounding roadmap, we'll then include your discussion item on the undergrounding roadmap,
Together.
which will more than likely be before our discussion items, which have now just gotten pushed back. Okay, all those in favor? Oh, sorry. that's your
Aye.
part.
I apologize, just for clarification, there was a lot of additions. Okay. Just to go through them, Mayor Davey, 11A3 Ultra, 11A4 Single-Use Plastics, Vice Mayor McCormick, mass address verification, 11A5. 11A6, zoning ordinance review, Councilmember Moss. Undergrounding electric, that would be Councilmember London. Councilmember Petros would be 11A8, website. 11A9, if you can repeat that for me.
Parks and open spaces.
Parks and open space. 11A10, texting while driving, and that would be 11A10, and 11A11 would be Councilmember Segurola, landscaping. Is
Right.
that,
That's perfect.
okay? Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item,
Texting while driving.
May I forgive me, Mayor, because I wanted to get clear from the attorney that I wasn't doing anything. I want to discuss, if you want to call it impact fees, when we had a zoning case, and I want to be able to discuss.
All right, so that's 11A 12.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Next item, Mayor, is public comment.
Okay, I have a bunch of speakers. If you want to speak, please come up with your green paper. They're in the back, fill it out, and then come up and you'll get 3 minutes. We have our first speaker is Karen Llorente.
Karen Urenti, 345 Cypress Drive. I want to give you my thoughts on the undergrounding. You all have spent $500,000, more or less, to hire a company to develop a plan for undergrounding a good portion of the utilities of the island. It took many months and many, many more meetings to come up with the most convoluted, confusing, complicated collection of papers that is passing for this report. That's $500,000, people, to achieve what has become the most divisive issue this community has yet faced. 7 intelligent, knowledgeable citizens of the village could have done a proper job in half the time and avoided dividing the village. The state legislature is now addressing the issue in committee, and it looks as if it has a good chance of passing on a vote before adjournment. I would suggest that the village council not move forward at this time with the issue. Wait to see how the state handles it, see if they vote, what they vote, and how it would or could affect us here in South Florida. Wait to see if what the state does is something we can work with and that could work with that would benefit our community as a whole. Remember, this issue is now in your hands. You accepted the report. The decisions that must be made have been entrusted to you all. This is why you were elected, to act for us, to act decisively.
Thank you. Next up is Ann Tainter.
Good evening, everybody. Ann Tainer, 170 Ocean Lane Drive. I'm here, I'd like to ask the question, but first I want to make a comment about something that was said at the last meeting in reference to the boat show costing a lot of money and not getting anywhere. And my comment is Miami is nothing but a bully. And according to Mayo Clinic, a bully is an aggressive person that usually wants power. I mean, that really sounds like Miami. And you should engage in getting somebody to help you fight them. You should get somebody, a community, to get behind you, but you never back down. And I think that's something for all of us to think about, because I've heard through the community that it's a waste of money. It's never a waste of money to go against a bully or a waste of time. My question is, I love Oasis, but they seem to be building a building next to them for I don't know how many years, and it's a real eyesore. So can you give me a report on that, or what's going on, or is anybody doing anything?
Would it be appropriate for the manager to?
Yeah, I don't know, at this point, I mean, yeah, do you have anything that you can say right now?
They have a certain date.
Yeah, please.
Right, so my recollection is the Unsafe Structures Board, which is administered through the county, provided the Oasis with 150 days of an extension to be able to complete the work. My recollection is mid-July, I think, is the due date. So staff has been working with their contractor and with the owner to try to, expedite the process, and then come mid-July, the village will be in a position to potentially take action.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's been going on forever. Thank you, have a good evening.
Next up, we have Javier Rodriguez. Sorry? Oh, and thank you for the pies. Javier?
Hi, Javier Rodriguez. I live in Marazul in 600 Grape Tree Drive. Just wanted to talk about the circular economy, reduce, recycle, and reuse. I think that's actually in the agenda, so that's really good. I wanted to ask the council to enhance the commitment of the village with, the recycling programs with the, circular economy to reduce the amount of plastic and other, things that we generate on a daily basis, and that, end up in the seas or in other places. So, just wanted to propose some measures that I think are going to be discussed as part of this meeting, actually. So consider the implementation of the same prohibition that was done in Coral Gables for single-use plastic. It's actually in the agenda. I think also it's very important that there is an education campaign about, what can we do as citizens to, to help with these issues. Not only about, replacing one thing with another, but just actually educating people to try and use as less plastic or bags or whatever as possible, if we can. And talk to our children as well in school so that they grow up with these habits, because at the end of the day, it's just a change of habit that we need to do. I think it's also important to make it easy for people to recycle things that cannot be recycled in our condominiums or in our houses. I think that there's a lack of that in the village. It's not easy to find a place where I can put a bottle or where I can put a bag or something. It's just very few places, and there's a lot of people that come from the outside that, need that, right? So I think that's also something that we should be considering. And then ask businesses to be, to collaborate on the resolution of this problem, to offer people the ability to recycle the things that they generate. Like if it is a business that generates plastic bags, then we should be able to return those plastic bags and recycle them on that particular business. The same with restaurants that offer like plastic containers for meals and things like that. And I think there's a lot of things that can be done, and hopefully we can do some of them. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Robert DeZuglu.
Good evening, Robert DeZuglu, 785 Glen Ridge Road. We were asked to put together some data regarding the businesses and the effect that Ultra had on them. I do have a short presentation. I'll try to get through it. It's not organized for this presentation, but we could, this sort of shows we had so far 10% of our membership that responded, and this shows the different types of businesses. Can you guys see that? It's kind of blurry. But basically, it shows that there's all different types of businesses that responded at this particular time. The question that Councilmember Moss asked us to pinpoint which were the people that live locally, and hold on, just give me a second. 52% are local, live locally in Key Biscayne. 35% are from Miami-Dade County, and 11% said other. So I think you were trying to pinpoint people that work here but don't live here and so on. So that was important. Then moving down. Are we getting apples soon?
My bad.
Hold on. Oh, I think here it is. So were you aware that Ultra Festival was on Virginia Key? Obviously, it shows I think it was 98%. The second question is, how were hours of operation affected? We see decreased hours was the largest one, which was around 55%, and 30% were stayed the same, and some increased. Did operation costs, what happened to your operation costs? So we had 37% said it increased, about 55% stayed the same, and the next said that it just decreased, a small percentage decreased. Hold on. What happened to your business? Did it go up? Did it go down? And you can see that close to 73% reported that business went down during that time. The volume of business went down. Do you recommend Ultra be relocated, stay, or be improved? And you can see that's 85% said, please move Ultra. So that's just the data that we have for now. We continue to collect data, but I thought that you needed it as quickly as possible. The manager had requested it, and I thought that would be beneficial to you. Thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When you're finished, you'll give it to the manager?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me, did you say 10% reported? These numbers are 10% of your
Membership, yes.
membership?
Yes, 37 businesses. Okay. It's going to take a while to get. We can give her this much at least, so this way she has some talking points for the defense that she's going to do towards Ultra that she had been looking for. So I'll forward this right now, and it's going to take time to get more, but we'll continue to collect it. And just so you know, we also collected some information regarding the 2040 to see what was important to the chamber members. I think you'll find that interesting as we move forward. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Oh, was I under 3?
Michelle Esteves.
Good evening, Michelle Esteves, 798 Crandon Boulevard. I am commending Winn-Dixie for start these efforts to banish the plastic bags. But it's not the only business, as you know. It's a great start because years ago that we had been trying to do this. We are accomplishing the straws, the plastic straws, as one for 30 years that I start cleaning the beach. They are the items that more affect our environment, but also the foam. We still have in many businesses that they are still using plates and glass and foam. That is the other one that is really, really a killer. So I asked to please to include that since you added other business with plastic. Don't forget the foam. I think that is very important. Second is, years ago, we started some initiative with the chamber to have reusable bags. There were some businesses, they produced them, and we pass it around the community. So maybe at this time, I'm going to hear the presentation from Winn-Dixie, but we will approach businesses again through the chamber, and there is some institution on the island that promote kids, entrepreneur and businesses, and I know it's a girl there that she's making reusable bags. I was trying to reach her, but then we crossed each other and I couldn't. She was Saturday at the farmer market here, and I think that will be a good interaction, and to have him to participate and will be a great idea to it. So I think that if we work all together on this, we can accomplish a lot. And again, don't forget the foam too. Thank you.
Ceci Sanchez. I'm going to tell you what she's going to talk about.
Good evening. I am so happy that you're formalizing the landscaping board at last. At last, but I have some questions that I would like you to clarify for us, please. I read the ordinance and number 5A, all that I'm asking clarification is the jurisdiction of the board shall be solely advisory and shall include identifying and developing beautification projects for the rights of way within the village, including but not limited to landscaping projects, identifying areas within the village in need of maintenance and upkeep. But my question is Is this all village property, green areas? Are we talking about the beach park? Are we talking about the lake park? Are we talking about all green Hacienda Canal, Hampton Lane Pocket Park? Is everything included, or are you restricting in what we can give suggestions that need care, better care? Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Don Ellisberg. And we've got one more after that. If anybody else would like to sign up, please do so now.
Mayor, council members, manager, I'm Don Ellisberg. I live at 177 Ocean Lane Drive, and I am here speaking on behalf of myself and Nancy Ellisberg with regard to your item that is somewhere on the agenda involving the hiring of a house counsel or a lawyer for the in-house lawyer, whatever you want to call it. And I know that this is going to take a long time, not for me, but for the process, probably. But I wanted to come here and very quickly tell you that I fully support what Councilman Segurola wants to do in terms of suggesting that the council consider getting in effect, a local attorney to work here in the village with the village manager, et cetera, regardless of what else you do with large-scale law firms who are, quote, the village attorneys. And I say that because it has been clear over the last couple of years that the ability of the village council, of the citizens, of the recent task force that I was privileged to serve on, eventually as vice chair, has been hampered by the way in which we have to get our legal services. Not that I want to challenge a particular legal service, but we have run into difficulties, totally difficulties on the undergrounding from soup to nuts, difficulties with the hurricane debris, difficulties, as everybody knows, with the kiteboarding, kite surfing, difficulties with ultra, and all of it suggesting that the process isn't working right. That the process isn't working right, and almost everybody running for office this last time around recognized it and said we have to do something about it. And I come to you because I've had probably more experience than most people. I was an attorney with a large federal agency with over 200 lawyers. I was the part of a general counsel of a very large labor organization for many years. I was actually a client as a senior official of the federal government with somewhat over 100 lawyers just working on the stuff I had to do within my agency. I've been a House counsel. I was general counsel for the United States Senate Labor Committee for some years. I've been a sole practitioner. I've been involved in multi-counsel and litigation, all those things. That's what you do if you've been around for about 55 years. And I don't have a specific answer because there are many ways to deal with this, but I simply want to come here and say that I support the notion that you need to deal with it. I think you need to deal with it for yourselves, for the village manager, and for those of us who are residents here to get what we are trying to do as a community in the most efficient and reasonable and cost-effective way. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And then my final speaker, Angela Pedraza.
Hi, good evening to all, and thank you for your time. I don't know if this
Your
is...
name, I'm sorry, your name and your
Angela
address.
Pedraza,
Thank you.
881 Ocean Drive, apartment 11G. And this is both a question and a request. The question as to whether there's authority on the village part in regards to the trash on the beach. I walk every day on the beach and pick up tremendous amounts of trash that is left behind by people. And tying with what Mayor Davis said at the beginning about you will discuss single-use plastics, I see with dismay how the rates serve their guests on the water the drinks with disposable cups and straws. And somehow that gets to me because, you know, that should not be happening. So hopefully you guys are able to stop that. And aside from that, is there anything that the village can do to control the trash that is left behind by the people? Or is that something that is at state level? I don't know. So that is why it's a question and a request.
I think the answer to that is we can, you know, we don't want people littering. It's against our ordinances. I think it's against county ordinances, against state law. But it's tough to, I think I can speak and say it's just tough to catch people. We get frustrated and we point it out and we pick up the trash. But we're right there with you. I think we can speak I think I'm speaking for everybody when I say we're against trash on the beaches. I think that's not a real dangerous position to take. But no, we're going to do more. Not to be glib about it, we're going to try and do more about single-use plastics, and it's education. Unfortunately, we still see people just sort of ignoring their own impact on the beaches. So we need to be better.
Okay, thank you
Thank you very much.
Let me just add, Madam Pedraza, you know, we're starting a whole series of efforts, including traffic enforcement, thanks to the chief, and getting better, because we talked about Key Biscayne Nice. And, you know, societies work when people obey the law, and we've had a tendency in Key Biscayne to be very lax. And one of the things you can do is literally shame them. Shame them if you see them littering the beach.
Yeah,
and then
well,
you can give them my private cell number if they complain, because people are embarrassingly disrespectful to all of us who do those kinds of things.
Yeah, my issue is more the fact that they have the energy to bring all the trash, use it, and then they don't have the energy to pick it up and they leave it behind.
That's right.
So by the time I get to it is when people have already left. Right. And, you know, you go, it's good exercise. I mean, you know, thank goodness it helps me control my weight a little bit. But, you know, you're going down every 10 steps to pick up something that was left behind. So that was kind of my...
We need to get better as a community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next item, Mayor, is board appointments, board reports by council.
I have no appointments this week. I hope to have... What's that? I have no appointments to make right now. We're going to talk about, we won't have any appointments until we have a board. That was my question. But we will then talk about that for next meeting. But we have none this week. I think we do have a new opening on the AB, so we'll be talking about that. I'll be bringing a recommendation in 3 weeks. Okay? But that's it. Anybody else? No? We're good? Okay.
Thank you. Next item, under special presentations, report to council by the Education Advisory Board.
Hi, good evening. How do we do it? Okay. Do you know how to do it?
Sure.
I'm a Mac person too. Kristen Guess, Education Advisory Board.
And Jeffrey Gonzalez, Education Advisory Board.
And thank you. We appreciate this opportunity to present our status update to you all, and we will try to make it as brief as possible, knowing how valuable your time is. So I've gone back and I've reviewed many tapes and minutes of council meetings, and it seems that we have a pretty consistent history here with all of you and your predecessors, that education has always been a very important topic. Buzz Vernon, Councilmember Laredo, well, you all have come up and spoken about education needs. It's been a topic that's been repeated many times. So it's so important, in fact, that in 2009, Vice Mayor Mike Davey brought up the idea of an education compact, and then the Education Advisory Board was created. Though no discussion regarding education would be complete without talking about Frank Kaplan. So Frank Kaplan, most notably, who in 2012 proposed the idea of an interlocal agreement with Miami-Dade County Public Schools. As we all know, the ILA led to the addition of the middle school at Mast, Key Biscayne's priority seating within the magnet program, the Cambridge magnet program, a joint use of playing fields, and the beautiful renovation at the K-8. So moving on, in 2015, I remember so well coming and speaking to you all in 2014. So a little history. 2009, the EAB was formed, and they worked on the compact. And in 2011, they presented the compact, and then Frank and Ed and everybody was doing a lot of work behind the scenes with the ILA. So the compact was never fulfilled or initiated or approved. And so John Gilbert brought it back in January 2014 because the district had asked him to revisit it and have it approved. So I remember being here in 2014 because so much had changed in those 5 years that the compact had been created by the first EAB. And I was here with Louisa Conway, and we came our very first time, and we spoke, and we said, can we get involved with this compact? Can you put the brakes on, because so many things had changed. So now you have the new AB. So 2014-15. And we were able to complete the compact, and it was adopted between the Village of Key Biscayne and Miami-Dade County Public Schools. The compact was created by the Village of Key Biscayne EAB in collaboration with Miami-Dade County Public School representatives. And as you know, the compact brings together our collective resources for the greater benefit of the students and citizens of the village. The compact focuses on collaboration with the district and village in areas such as student achievement, community involvement, communications, and facilities. I have a quote in here from Councilmember London, and from 2009, kids are our future and the best investment we can make. So just a quick list of the members here. As you can see, lots of members, council members, vice mayor, mayors, pediatric, physicians, many varied people have served on this EAB. These are the current board members. We've got new members this year, a teacher from the school, which is great. It's the first time we've had a teacher on the board. We have Jeffrey here is new, a few other new members. We do have the vacancy that Mayor Davey mentioned. Our meetings are held the second Thursday of every month. They are noticed. They're in the Building and Zoning conference room, and we'd love to have more people come out and join us. Residents are encouraged to attend, and it's sort of like what you have here, resident comments. They come and they speak. We've had many people come and bring things to our attention that we weren't even aware of, like the bus situation over at Mast. You know, parents came and brought that to us, and we addressed it with the district. So it's really important that we get the word out and we get more people involved and attend. And the Education Compact. Brief slide. Here are some of the key players that we've had the privilege of working with at the local level. We have, obviously, we all know Mr. Rafa, the president of the K-8, Dr. McCoy, who has been an amazing addition over at Mast, and our school board member, Marita Roja, and our wonderful principal at our feeder school, Coral Gables Senior High, Mr. Acosta. And the next slide, you see some of the wonderful people from Miami-Dade County Public Schools that we've had the pleasure of forming really impactful relationships with. This is a huge bureaucracy, as you all know, fourth largest school district in America. And as another quote from Mr. London, everybody's feeding at the trough. So to get at the Miami-Dade County, so to develop these relationships where we have actually had Mr. Pace, Dr. Strickland come and speak to our residents in this very room over their concerns is quite an accomplishment, I think, in just developing relationships. So what have we done? We've done a lot that we're really proud of. As part of our collaboration and the impact, we have assessed many opportunities with teachers, parents, students, most importantly, the principals of the schools. In the formation of the compact, the principals were there at every single meeting, along with lots of Miami-Dade County public school representation. Things that we have, we, meaning you in the village, over at the K-8, we've been really supportive of professional development, mindfulness training, a lot of STEAM, project-based learning, kinesthetic equipment, as you can see the pictures over there. Lots of things over there. Desktop computers, STEAM. I had to look up the Consortium for Mathematics and Science Engineering. You know, lots of science equipment, the little glasses they wore for the eclipse. Over at MAST, we're really proud that we brought back the new student orientation program, which is really important. It's called their Summer Anchor Program, and this year it's going to be the first week after school from the 10th to the 14th, and it's open to all new students. And the village has proudly supported and sponsored that. Tutoring, HIP, the Robotics Club, the Green Initiative. As you heard, public comments regarding green initiatives. That's live and well over at MAST and some of the K-8. And both at the K-8 and MAST, we've supported lots of Cambridge training. Teachers went to California. They continue to train teachers today regarding implementing the Cambridge program, materials and extracurricular activities. Gable Senior High, we've got another slide on that. It's worthy of its own slide. Here's some more cute pictures. You see Mr. Bonacce, our assistant principal, Mr. Rafa. We bought new books for the media center. There's some of the desktops and the students during the solar eclipse. So some very tangible things as well. So we wanted to highlight 3 areas that we're particularly proud of, and I know this is going on, but we'll make it real fast. 3 areas to highlight that the village can be really proud of having been a part of. The first one is the Safe Routes to School. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. We brought it to, 2014. It was our first year. Councilmember Moss remembers that very well. So almost half the parents over at the K-8, when they were surveyed, they all, more than half, encouraged their children to bike or walk to school. And that being said, the Safe Routes to School will receive the federal grant money, which is a big deal, almost $1 million, but to really bring safety to the perimeter of the school. It covers a 1-mile radius around the school. So what we have done, we've worked, I know it seems like nothing here when you see it here, but we've had hundreds of meetings about Safe Routes to School. You know, this is a bureaucracy here with the FDOT and such. So we've canvassed the perimeter of the K-8 with traffic engineers, the FDOT, village staff, and we're continuing to monitor the process, and we'll keep you updated. The second item that we wanted to really highlight this evening is the MAST address verification. So the EAB worked with district representatives over 2 years exploring and developing address verification method to protect the interest of our students. So address verification, again, was one of those things that came up meeting after meeting, and we had many representatives talk to us about what they did in other enclosed municipalities. They had, like, the village would give out a certificate to residents. We didn't go that route. There's a lot of privacy concerned with the district holding on and the schools holding on to their addresses and information, so they can't share a lot with us. So we came up, as you approved, fortunately, thank you, the address verification, which thank you, Vice Mayor McCormick, for putting that on the agenda tonight, because we have a note here. The timing is of the essence with that. But you will see 53 students were identified with this address verification program and were found to not meet residency requirements. Those spots were filled with kids off the wait list. Even if it was one kid, that matters, but 53 is a huge, huge notch. So we want to continue that program, and we fully support renewing the contract. Thank you. Another thing many of you probably remember, third topic we really want to highlight is a lot of notes and discussions regarding MAST enrollment. You've all been the subject, I'm sure, of many heated, on the receiving end of many heated conversations. So through our continued coordinated efforts with the K-8, with MAST, Miami-Dade County Public Schools, we feel that we have strongly improved the communication and messaging with regards to informing people about the magnet application process and requirements. And it's made such a difference that I hope none of you have heard much this year for the first time. We want to update the village website regarding the MAST address verification, academic requirements to continue to increase the public understanding. Regrettably, there is still a wait list. That's sort of a bittersweet. We have so many options here, so we're pretty fortunate to have that. The improved communication, though, helped sort of ease that and the expectations. We have annual meetings, and we have a meeting coming up very soon so that we can fully report back to you regarding the numbers. That meeting's been planned to discuss the current enrollment numbers. I want to say thank you to the Village of Key Biscayne for being such a huge part, and Anna De Verona was so instrumental in the next slide. You know, to have our residents receive something like this from the village is just such a wonderful example of collaboration and really reaching out, and to where we feel like we've done our best to blanket our community and their responsibilities for their children, honestly. And hey, here, silver platter, this is how you do it. So just to cross every T and dot every I, making sure parents are fully aware. Next, back to Coral Gables Senior High. This is our school. This is our high school. This is our feeder school. So without MAST Academy, that's a magnet. You know, it's a lottery. This is our feeder program. And we have about 65 kids from Key Biscayne that are currently enrolled in Gables Senior High. Jackie Kellogg, we all know Jackie, she is the president of the PTA there, so she has been very helpful in informing us and keeping us notified of what's going on over there. And members from the EAB, our vice mayor, our school board member, Marita Roja, they toured Gables recently, and it was a wonderful experience. And they also discovered, unbeknownst to us, they have received $26 million grant, GEO bond funding, $26 million for a renovation. So that is huge. It's gonna start this summer. It's gonna be about 3 to 4 years, $26 million renovation. And to support this as well, a woman, June Morris, has created the Friends of Gables High, and they're working to raise funds to build a performing arts center, a band performing arts at the school. So big things on the horizon. And if you look at the offerings, look at the academic offerings there, all those different academies. They have an amazing special ed program, which we do not have a really good local offering in that department. So world-class education over there at Gables Senior High. And in closing, I'm going to pass it on to our latest, newest addition when we talk about the future of the EAB. Jeffrey, take it away.
Thank you, Kristen, for allowing me to speak. I think, thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity. I think this is an important part, being a new member to this council, to actually have this ending slide, in that it made me really internalize a lot when I first came on and read through the compact, read through the ILA, and really tried to understand the goals and the values that we have set and the underlying pillars that we should be thinking about. And when I think about, and everybody, people that are listening, I think about the children that are in this community under 18, and I think there's a statistics a little similar to how Ed London thinks, and many of us do think, is that children are a third of our population, but they really are all of our future, right? And so if we think about it that way, I really want to highlight why it's important for me coming onto the EAB, and any new members coming onto the EAB who aren't familiar with the past programs, who aren't familiar with the future potential of what this EAB can do in supporting and working for you, is thinking about student achievement and really how we are. And when I come on, and any decisions that I or influence or suggestions or questions I'll be making, it's about thinking about the kids' futures, right, and the teachers and how they're all impacted, from Tarafa to McCoy to the support teachers. It's thinking about community involvement and getting people that are watching, people that don't come, to understand that we need our children, and we all need our children to keep moving forward. And as we heard this evening, is we are all going to move forward regardless of what happens. We're all capable, strong people, and we'll do that. But we need commitment from people. We need commitment from the community. And then I think one of the key pillars here is that there's clear and concise communication that's direct with the county officials. That's everything between the village, the district, regarding all educational programs, because things do not happen unless we're communicating the value proposition to it, maybe the cost-benefit analysis to it, so that people that are making decisions here are able to make these informed decisions, along with the council and the county to help support us through it. So I thank you very much. We're preparing for 2019, 2020, and as a new member and with some other new members, I'm catching up quickly, and I do look forward to working for you. Thank you.
Any questions?
I'd like to. Good.
No, Christian, I'm deeply thankful for the work that you and the committee have done.
Thank you.
It's very impressive. The presentation itself is pretty impressive. It sets a very high standard for the other committees that have to come. Your presentation was almost perfect, except when you started quoting Ed London. That's where you went off. But this is a very good example of the abundance of doers in Key Biscayne. People who quietly get things done, in contrast to the other abundance of complainers. And so I commend you and your members for all you do. And I know it's thankless because it's very controversial, very heated when it comes to kids. And I would only ask my colleagues, because if I say resolution, we're going to get into drafting something. But I think it's very important, Kirsten, with our full backing, that we also every once in a while stop and thank other institutions like the school board, like the Coral Gables High School, our wonderful school board, in particular our director. And I would suggest that we have a sense of the board, because give you, so that I even attach it with our stationery and you sign it. You know, people really. And I know there are conflicts, but in the end, we're working together, and they need us, and we need them. And sometimes all I hear is the 2% negative.
In fact, you are absolutely correct. And in that line of thinking, that's already been done one time.
Okay. Well, I want you to have the sense. Formally, I'd like to make a motion of this.
We did do that. We had a resolution, and we presented it to Superintendent Carvalho. Vice Mayor Allison McCormick was on the board at the time, and presented it with member Lily Warner, I believe, and also with some of our children expressing gratitude for our renovation over at the K-8. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a few years ago, and I think it's a good idea.
Good idea.
And
to
I
continue.
met briefly
Absolutely.
the new mass director, and everybody tells me he's great. And I
it's
met
time again.
through your colleague,
Yeah.
the Coral Gables principal, and I thought he was also impressive.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a nice practice.
We'll do another one.
Yes, and when
Thank
we
you.
did it last time, we were the only ones.
Good.
Brett?
Time again. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you guys as well, because I know, the time you put into this, and I think it's really important. Whatever you guys did this year, last year after the mass, all this stuff came out, we had a line out the door. This year we had nobody coming here and complaining. So whatever you guys did in the communication side was excellent.
You were
So
part of
great
it, too.
job, and working with everybody, whoever was part of it. But I know that you guys work on this really hard. So great job.
Well, thank you. I had, just a quick little note, I had one of the people that was quite upset during that meeting here, and I had a lovely conversation with her Friday evening at the party for the school, and she said after that meeting, she just changed, and she felt really positive about the experience she had here, and she got more involved in a positive way, so that's good.
Councilmember Petros?
So kind of dovetailing on what he was talking about, I was curious at our middle school admissions if there's room there, and I was also very happy to hear that Coral Gables is getting this big infusion of cash. And I think, I didn't know if the EAB's taking measures to not only educate the community on different options, but the quality of those options and working to try to make those better every year so that people don't feel like there's only one outlet that they want, basically. So is that happening in any way?
Yes, it is happening. In fact, that's part of our compact with having a workshop for education options and alternatives and to work towards, I mean, look at what we did tonight with Gables. That's a big step. So
great. Thank you.
Slowly but slowly, but thank you, yeah.
Councilmember London?
About 3 years ago, I guess, Kristen, you and Julie sent me down to the school board to,
Julie Dick.
to get more schools, to get a new school and everything else. We're overcrowded, and we know the result of that. But one of the things that they came up in that meeting, we discussed, we had these large classrooms that they were going to partition. Did they ever partition them? No. They're still in big rooms.
No, it hasn't been necessary with the opening of the Mass Middle School.
So you don't need it now?
No,
Okay.
we do not.
Thank you.
Overcrowding is a thing of the past for now, knock on wood.
They did, though, carve out a lot of new student stations at that
did that,
time. They
okay.
left some of the big classrooms and just changed the model and put 2 classes in it, but they converted other spaces like teacher planning rooms and so forth.
But we do have
Yes.
our science lab back. Dr. Kelly had mentioned he had visited the school. This was way back. And he said, there's no science lab. There's no, the list of things that we had lost due to the overcrowding. That's all
Good.
sprung back to life.
Thank you.
Feeling good about it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything
Thank
you
you.
do.
Good night.
Bring 'em.
Next item, Mayor's presentation by Winn-Dixie regarding plastic bags.
Thank you, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is George Cabo. I'm Regional Vice President for Winn-Dixie, South Florida. To my left is Georgie Lago. He's our District Manager for Miami-Dade County and Monroe counties. And many of you know Jose Yanez. He's our store manager here at our Key Biscayne store. We're very proud. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today regarding our shopping bag program here at our Key Biscayne store. We've been serving the community proudly for over 25 years. We're excited about our future and the future here together with Key Biscayne. We wanted to give you a brief update today on the usage of plastic in our store here on Key Biscayne. We recently made the decision to move to only using paper shopping bags at the store and limit the use, and I say limit the use. We will have some plastic available only by customer request. And we've been doing this now for about 3 to 4 weeks. We've had a few availability bumps in the road with our suppliers on paper, but I can tell you, as I was at the store today, we've worked those out, and we should be good. We made this decision for 2 reasons. Number one, based on feedback from our customers that is obviously what they would like to see. And number two, our desire to help keep this beautiful community of Key Biscayne pristine and clean, protect its future. We are also moving as quickly as we can to expand our reusable bag program in the store with a longer term goal of even minimizing the amount of paper that we're using in the store. And we're going to be providing some bins at the entrance to the store, and hopefully they'll be there within the next couple of days, where customers that do have plastic shopping bags can return them to the store and drop them in the bins, and we will send them back to our facilities for recycling. So I thank you for your time and your patronage, and we'll answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Moss.
Do you have any complaints since you did it in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
No,
From anybody? Everybody's been pretty accepting.
No, it's been pretty accepting. We've had a few very small percentage of people that have asked for plastic, but as I said, it's very small, and overall, it's been very well accepted.
Excellent, thank you.
A couple quick questions. The self-checkouts, were difficult with paper bags because of the weight. Have you been able to resolve that issue?
Yes, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jose, we've worked through it.
Yeah, we're working to get a solution as soon as possible to fix that.
So you still need to use paper bags for the
Yeah, we're gonna go
self-checkout?
paper bag there too.
Well, we are using paper bags.
We're using
here
paper
today.
bag.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
use paper bags.
Yeah, we are using.
But when you put it on the scanner, it messes with the weight.
Gotta put it on, you've got to say use own bags, then you've got to put whatever bags you're going to put on, then you can start them.
So maybe we just need to, from our perspective, do a little more education for the customer at the self-checkout, and we'll train our folks to do that. One other issue that we found is the bags. We're only providing one size bag today at self-checkout, and it's a larger bag. So within the next several days, we'll provide a smaller bag in the store for smaller purchases as well.
Two other questions. Another thing, I was just in another city that if you chose to use one of their plastic bags, they actually charged you a dime. Is that something that you would consider doing in the future once we've been re-educated, kind of to make that final commitment to the community?
I couldn't answer that here, but I could get with our teams in our corporate offices and share the thought and discuss it.
And then the last question I had, and I wanted to commend you and thank you. I personally had someone from your corporation ask for a meeting with me just to give feedback about the grocery store and how to make it better and to make improvements, because we're always looking to make things better. And they told me about some upcoming upgrades. Would you be able to tell our community about that?
Well, I think our corporate folks are trying to get on the agenda for a meeting on the 21st. And
okay.
They're trying to. So hopefully they'll be able to share more with you. But yes, we're looking to upgrade the store and make it even better than it is today.
Thank you for partnering with us.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Laredo?
I want to, you already saw the spontaneous support for Jose. It wasn't staged.
No, we love it.
He actually does a lot to mitigate some things that you don't necessarily do so well. And if it weren't for him, it could become more of a crisis. And so I think you should be proud of the team you have. And I commend what I also know about some improvements. And there's no other entity in this community that impacts everybody's life but you all. And you do have sort of a monopoly. I lived here long enough to remember 2 supermarkets. So being a capitalist, competition. But from a corporate point of view, I hope you look at it as an opportunity rather than to slack a little bit in the quality of the products and the pricing and everything else. Upgrading is going to be wonderful, but also I hear a lot from people about to make sure that your prices and your match the quality that they expect. But I mean, you really are a barometer of our citizens more than just about anything else, save for the police department. And you're lucky to have the people you have working under you to give you a good image.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it. And now on the pricing, I just wanted to assure you we have one price zone. We're not priced any differently here on Key Biscayne and Wood.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the initiative, because it is, as you hear, it's important to our community that we start getting away from plastics and even moving beyond. I appreciate you already talking about moving from paper even to the reusables, because that's where we as a community have to go. And we as consumers, I mean, really, you're driven by us as the consumers. So if we all want reusable, and then so I appreciate you taking the initiative. I do appreciate everything Jose does, because I'm in there a lot, and I know how hard he works to keep that place going, and I really am looking forward to some of the changes we're going to hear about on the 21st. So thank you for coming tonight.
Very good. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice evening.
I'm going to get some water real quick.
Mayor, next items, preliminary report impact of the Ultra Music Festival on the University of Miami Experimental Hatchery and Virginia Key Soundscape.
So I'd like to introduce Rumia on behalf of the Village of the Key Biscayne Foundation. She's going to walk us through some of the preliminary findings that the University of Miami has had with regard to the hatcheries at the NOAA facility.
Excuse me. So I'm going to, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is very similar to what I spoke about the last time I was up here, but we do have more updated results. So sound recordings were collected both in the air and in the tanks at the Erasmus hatchery. And they also collected sound information from the shoreline near Bear Cut and in the water of Lamar Lake at the Virginia Key Beach North Point Park. So they collected blood samples from toadfish, which is what they were testing on in the hatchery, to assess the stress levels as indicated by the stress hormone cortisol. Both sound and blood samples were collected during the undisturbed portions of before Ultra, also during sound checks, and then during Ultra while the music was going on. The actual sound level in the air rarely exceeded 80 decibels. However, in the tanks, they found that on average, it was 10 decibels higher than that, so at least 90 decibels within the tanks, because obviously sound travels different through the water than it does through the air. So even though it was well within the permitted limits, the sound level was much higher within the tanks, and that's including, keep in mind that Ultra set up a barrier between the hatchery and the festival area to protect the hatchery. So they still had significantly high levels of sound there, even though it was within the permitted sound area. And it showed that the toadfish within the tanks that they were testing did show significant stress levels. Excuse me, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. So there is always variation in the cortisol levels in toadfish. It's a multi-layered response when you're testing cortisol levels. There's the brain that first receives a stressor, and then that releases a specific type of hormone that then goes to the pituitary gland that releases a secondary hormone, and then that hormone then triggers the kidneys to release cortisol. And so there are checks and balances within like the body of the toadfish, and then you do have things that will cause these variations. They are very well studied, so they know what these variations of cortisol are within the toadfish. So keeping those in mind and recording those as they're recording these stress levels of the toadfish, they found a 5-fold increase in cortisol levels during the music festival, during Ultra, which is higher than what they would perceive if being chased by or listening to a predator. So, and when I say listening to, it's specifically dolphins are the ones that tend to target toadfish, and they make clicking sounds that toadfish can hear. And hearing those causes their stress level to elevate, obviously, because they realize that they're being hunted. So running away or swimming away from dolphins or hearing those clicks will cause an elevation in their cortisol levels. And the music from Ultra, the sound levels, caused an even higher level of stress when measuring by cortisol level. So the researchers concluded that in response to the elevated noise due to the sound from Ultra, toadfish experienced a level of stress that is higher than what would be experienced when being chased by a simulated predator or when hearing a predator. What's important to note is that cortisol, the reason that cortisol is released by the body is that it gives an immediate survival response. It increases the sugar level in the blood, which gives the toadfish energy to escape or to hide or to do whatever. You know, it basically, it's like people that have like an elevated adrenaline response in relation to some kind of stressor. The problem is that what that does is then it shuts off other things that are critical for survival, such as digestion, reproduction, natural social behaviors, and communication. None of those when you're trying to survive, none of those are essential. And so they're all shut off. So when you're looking at long-term effects, having those shut off continuously can obviously cause huge long-term problems in, toadfish survival. The researchers were not willing to say that Ultra does cause long-term effects because it is only a 3-day festival, but that doesn't mean that there are not long-term effects that do happen. But they won't say that because there is no evidence of that from this research. Some other things that are important to note, to reiterate what Dr. Danielle McDonald said at the Virginia Key Advisory Board meeting last week, they consider this a canary in the coal mine. And the main reason for that is that toadfish are extremely hardy fish. they're very difficult to kill and they're very difficult to like annoy. Just a quick example, one of the research things that they do at UM is putting fish in swim tunnels to measure different metabolic rates of swimming and, at different speeds, things like that. And toadfish don't like to swim. They like to sit and burrow and not move. You put them in a swim tunnel and turn it on and they just get pushed up against the back and they don't care. They just sit there being pushed and it doesn't bother them. They're very, very hardy fish. And so the idea of this type of a very hardy fish experiencing this level of stress is important, because when you then consider the other more sensitive fish that live within the same area of Biscayne Bay, you would have to extrapolate that those fish are going to experience a higher level of stress than the toadfish, and that can be much more detrimental. I also want to quickly go over Councilmember Segurola. You asked about the mosquito spraying. Yes. I did actually ask an expert about that, and I just want to read you his response. According to Ultra, if we're taking them at their word, they used Essentia IC3 as a spray and BTI dunks in the water to prevent larval recruitment. Both of these are comparatively good options environmentally speaking. Essentia is a mix of natural ingredients, including rosemary oil, geraniol, and peppermint oil, while BTI dunks are basically blocks of the bacteria Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, which preys on mosquito larvae. Both are organic in that sense, and compared to synthetic chemical compounds, are comparatively friendlier to the environment. They're probably the better options for mosquito control. Essentia is not regulated, but it has been, because it only has exempted ingredients. BTI dunks are regulated, but they seem to be registered for liberal use. It's possible the dunks were used illegally, but there isn't really any way to prove that.
Question.
Yes.
Has anyone outside of Ultra given an opinion on either accepting or rejecting those conclusions that the Ultra representatives gave?
On the mosquito spraying specifically?
The effects and their contents.
I don't think anybody else has given an opinion. David Winker, an attorney, has voiced in his opinion in several, I've read him in a few articles in the news. I don't know if I think there was talk about filing a lawsuit, but I don't know that he has. But that's the only thing that I've seen. I can't say for certain, but I don't think that any environmental organizations or anybody else has issued any opinions about the mosquito spraying, because assuming that what they say in their environmental report about the spraying, it seems to be within legal limits.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all I have, unless I can try to answer any questions you guys have.
I have one quick question.
Thank you.
Are any of these environmental groups, given these findings, feeling that they want to put up opposition to Ultra continuing at that site?
I can't say for certain. I would say probably. I think a lot of groups they've always been very uncomfortable with it, and this just shows that it could very well be a problem. I mean, one of the things to consider that I didn't mention is, these were fish that were tested in tanks in the hatchery, which was right next to the festival. But then you can extrapolate like what that would cause to fish in the wild, which are like right, the shoreline comes right up against the festival grounds also. And there's at least one stage right next to Bear Cut. So you would imagine that, there's no barrier there. So the sound would just carry right into the water. So, and Virginia Key is a critical wildlife habitat, a good portion of it. So I haven't heard specifically from any environmental groups that they are planning on doing anything specific, but I have heard, grumblings basically that, it is a problem, and this kind of just shows that it is a problem. What we will have is the full report from UM. Hopefully by the end of the week, but definitely before May 9th, before the commissioners meet next week. And that will include the sound data, which we don't have yet. So right now, all we have is the stress hormone level data from the fish, but we will also have the sound data should be mostly analyzed by then, so we'll have that information. So we'll know what the sound levels are in the water, and then using that, we can extrapolate what the stress level might be for the fish. And beyond that, just, if we give that data to other experts, they can maybe see, like, how would this affect a manatee or a sea turtle or something else that's in that area. But as of right now, I can't say definitively that we know that anybody's specifically interested in doing anything other than nobody's really happy.
May I? Oh, sorry.
I'm just going to speculate. I don't know what kind of research they do exactly there, but they said that they probably would not put it down that this would cause long-term damage, but it could disrupt their actual research that's going on in there, right? And they could say that this is a disruptor to us doing research because there's a abnormality going on inside what would typically happen. So so maybe they'll come up with something like that, but I don't know.
It's possible. The problem is that the tanks that they tested were specifically placed there for this study, and the tanks that hold their broodstock were insulated because they were trying really hard to protect them from the sound. Because they have had issues in the past where loud sounds coming from festivals or other events have actually caused their, like, mahi, for instance, to literally jump out of the tank. Or ram up against the side. And that's actually what, at the very, very first meeting months ago, I think in November, Dr. Avasar wrote a letter, the dean from Rasmus, saying that these are complications that can happen when the sound is too loud. They ram up against the side, they jump out of the tank, they kind of go crazy. But they did insulate those tanks, and they didn't test any of their brood stock to see what the effect was because their brood stock is too valuable. And the toadfish that were tested they're euthanized to be tested. So, but that is actually, like, it is very important to them. It's one of the reasons that they wanted to be involved in the study, because it's very important for them to know how the fish in the hatchery are affected, because it's a huge investment for them. And their broodstock has been cultivated for years. So to have that damage is a huge blow.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that I don't know exactly what your role is, but the answer about what they're thinking of doing, if it wasn't for this council's urgent involvement on the surprise item in the city commission to approve this with no conditions almost, we were able to persuade our colleagues in the City of Miami Commission to set certain standards and tests that they would review as they look to the May 9th decision. So I hope you communicate back to your colleagues in the environmental issue that, this is something important for them to be engaged. If their engagement is going to be academic or, you emphasize the long term, well, it wasn't not supposed to be, plus it's impossible under the scientific method to make this a long-term effect program. But the overwhelming impression and evidence is that this is not good for the animals and fish in Virginia Key. And it has to be stated in this plain English, because they really went out of their way to set these standards. So they need to be proactive. This is not the time to say, well, we don't want to take a position. I would be very disappointed and actually very surprised, because I know you can't answer, but in answering Petrus's question, it was a very, this is not the time to be on the fence.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And this commission, just so that you're on the record, were unanimously opposed to it, and we passed a resolution again at the last meeting that we are united on this issue.
Yeah.
So that okay.
Good to know. I mean, I can't specifically answer for UM, but I do know that they are going to give us, like I said, the sound data hopefully very soon, before the May 9th meeting. We hope to issue a report to the commissioners before the May 9th meeting. And they, some of the researchers, at least the head researcher, if not some others, are planning on speaking at the commission meeting on the 9th about their research. So I know at least that much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no problem.
Next item, Mayor, would be the village manager's report. Number 1 would be second quarterly budget report to council.
Okay, so this is the second report that we're putting forth. What we have done is by fund, we've looked at the revenues and the expenditures. We have footnoted any discrepancies or any things that we wanted to sort of point out and highlight. I think this report, I think some of the accomplishments that we've achieved, we are in the process of looking at our investment portfolio, and we have transferred some of our investments into a state account. We anticipate that once the transaction is complete, we will generate approximately $200,000 annually in additional investment income. One of my goals moving forward is to develop a more robust projection system for both revenues and expenditures for all funds, including salary projections, as well as introducing a level of service concept where on a policy level the council can establish certain levels of service and then staff can develop a budget that supports and adheres to that level of service. Nothing in particular jumps out. I'm here with our interim CFO. We can happily answer any questions. I did have the opportunity to walk each of you through the report and field any preliminary questions, but we would be happy to take any questions at this time.
Questions? Not really a question, but comment. Thank you for doing this. I think that's really helpful. And then maybe you could tell the community, remind them when we find out about our property taxes and the amount of money that comes in, and if there's any projections on what that's going to look like.
So I did have the opportunity to have lunch with the property appraiser last week, and the preliminary roll comes out on June 1st, and then the final roll comes out on July 1st. The indication I got from the property appraiser was that the higher end properties, there is going to continue to be a decline this year. So I'm anticipating either the same or less roll value. The impact to our residents, depending on homestead exemptions and other exemptions that may be available to our residents, the dollar amount may not change, but we do expect the value of the properties at large across the village to continue to decline this year.
In your meeting, did he tell you whether or not that was consistent with the rest of the county in any way?
The understanding I got was that in general, values are increasing. It was really more an adjustment factor on the higher end of the market in neighborhoods like ours and Aventura, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
As a follow-up, also, one thing that we're going to be providing to the community, he did give us some material with regard to homestead exemption fraud. The property appraiser's office is really trying to take some strides in eliminating homestead fraud within Miami-Dade County. There's also one thing that I learned was that with regard to rentals, short-term rentals, there is a 50% reduction in your homestead exemption as a result of putting your home onto the vacation rental sites. So I would suggest if folks are participating in that business, look at the value of the homestead exemption and half of that, and see if the income generated by the rentals, makes sense from a business perspective. And we'll be putting out some material that he provided as a public service announcement to help folks understand both of those concepts, as well as there are over a dozen different exemptions that some of our residents may be eligible for that they may not be aware of. So I'd like to share that information with the community so folks can take advantage of that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, Mayor, is dog park camera proposals.
So the council directed staff to look at installing dog cameras at the dog park. We did receive a quote. We did receive some proposals. Basically, the cost estimate came in at about $9,500 for the initial year for the installation, which would include 6 cameras plus the feed to a closed circuit television network. The feeds are not monitored continuously. There is a 7-day retention period on the data. So basically, every week the film, repeats over what was there before. Typically within the parks, our experience has been that retention period has been sufficient. We're usually made aware of any incident within a day or the day of or immediately, and we've been able to look back at the tapes and be able to identify any vandalism or anything that we need to pursue.
Quick question, I think I brought this up. I was told by dog owners that there was glass all over the
Yes, we spoke about that with staff. We didn't get any feedback on that.
I haven't seen anything.
When was that?
No, I hadn't seen anything either, but somebody came to me and said, like Saturday morning or Sunday morning, they'd go into the park. What, I'm sorry, what? Oh, sorry. My mic, oh, sorry, Peter, that's why you're jumping up. I had, another dog member, I'm trying to remember whose owner it was. They said that there'd been glass all over the sidewalk, all over the dog park, and I thought that's kind of odd. That would have, and I hadn't seen anything. Yeah, and I go pretty much every day, so I hadn't seen it, but
I missed it.
Well, you would miss it if it happened for me. But no, okay. Well, then it was a rumor. Rumor has it. So, I mean, $9,500 to find out which owner is not picking up their poop seems a little steep. Yeah.
I usually, when I pick up poop from other dogs, it's usually in the morning, and I think a lot of times it's small dogs.
Can't find it.
And at night, when it's dark, they don't see what the dog's doing, or I don't think people intentionally don't pick it up. Some do, but I think most people do.
I think that's
they
right.
just don't see it. And I think if you let people know, when you're walking around picking up your own poop, pick up other poop too.
Right.
That's all. And everybody works together.
Saved us $9,500. We've just saved this community money by doing aerobics with dog poop. I think that's a good thing.
Poop pickers.
Can I bring up one other thing about the dog park? And I spoke to Todd about this. There's weeds growing through, or grass growing through the artificial turf, and I want to make sure that we get a handle on that before it
becomes a problem.
Takes over the
Should be
the turf.
poison.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Ed. Poison the dog park. That's perfect.
But I agree with you.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then, I mean, there's some like little maintenance thing, but the park's awesome. I mean, the dog park is just phenomenal.
Heavily
it
used.
really is used really well, and people have a ball. We have our morning group and we have our afternoon groups, and so it's kind of nice to get out there and do it. So, all right, thank you for that one. And now we come to
Next
Ed's
item, parking lift analysis.
So village staff was directed to put an RFP out with regard to the lifts for vehicles. So I'm happy to say that we went through a very effective RFP process. We had an evaluation committee. We had a very objective process where we had a weighted scoring for each of the criteria. We received 2 proposals, one from Klaus and one from Omer. The proposal basically introduced a turnkey installation, that would produce an additional 22 parking spaces. The top-ranked firm, the cost estimate came in at about $260,000, which included maintenance and warranty for the first 2 years, and then an $8,000 annual recurring maintenance thereafter. In addition to this, we understood the sentiments of the council being the root problem is parking in this part of town. So we took it a little bit further and we looked at some other options with regard to restriping. So on Village Greenway, between our building and Village Hall, we ran some schematics and did an opinion of probable cost from an engineering perspective, where we would be able to make the roadway one-way and create angular parking, which would generate an additional 7 parking spaces for about $22,000. In addition, we looked at Fernwood behind the Village Green, and there's an opportunity there to again create angled parking, and that would generate about an additional 37 parking spaces. Pros and cons, I think, from it's a significant, cost. It's an investment for either the lift system or either of the restriping solutions. The solution on Fernwood would require some curb and gutter replacements and some landscaping changes. In addition to the cost, one con that I see is that we'd be reducing the sidewalk space and perhaps the tree canopy. There are things we can do to mitigate the tree canopy over time. We can design this so that we can have a nice lush canopy, but there would be a time for it would take time for those to grow. I also think in promoting alternative modalities, a nice wide sidewalk is always really nice. And so some of the design, because of the limited geometry and space that we have in the right-of-way, might cut into some of the sidewalk. We also looked at employee parking. There have been a few things that we've been discussing with staff. We're right now looking at how can we incentivize our own staff members to park in other places and perhaps shuttle or freebie or walk to the office, which might free up some spots. We also looked at golf cart parking. So there's potentially some opportunities, and again, pros and cons that I can observe of restriping in the community center garage to allow for 3 golf carts per 2 spots. As an interim step, we have posted signage asking folks that are coming on golf carts to please try to not take a full spot, to please try to share or park tandem if you're kind of working with somebody. We've also made some observations with regard to public works equipment and our recreation equipment. There's some equipment stored outside of the fire department. There's some equipment stored behind the community center. There's some equipment that's stored in the community center. So I think that reiterates that there's a need for perhaps a public works storage yard. I don't know to what extent that idea has been tossed around, but it's become evident to me that it's becoming increasingly a problem. There's also some opportunities perhaps with freebie, with our freebie service provider. Right now, there are 2 spots in the community center that are used for charging stations, as well as out front. There are some spots there. So as we progress with the negotiations with freebie, we can perhaps revisit with them. I don't know if there's an opportunity in some of the condos or in private residences or some other opportunity where we can charge those vehicles outside of the center core, thereby freeing up some spaces. So those are some of the things that we've looked at. I think what we're looking for at this point is some feedback as to do we want to proceed with particularly the unfunded, more expensive projects. The low-hanging fruit, we're just kind of working through and trust that we'll work through that. So with that, we can take any questions.
I think we should hire a consultant to look into this. I just want to see if I can get your head to explode. That was my goal. I think, well, one thing that had been brought up is are we gonna buy the parking lot? I mean, that's something we can talk about. Brett, you want to go, and then
my question, I like that you spoke about how a parking space, or you could park multiple golf carts in the same space or a combination of spaces. And that was going to be my question, is that looking at the backside of the Village Green along Fernwood, right now we have parallel parking there. And if I go there during soccer, when my daughter's playing soccer, you will see 4 golf carts lined up in one parking space. Now we're going to move diagonal, right? It's going to be more difficult for them to be able to do that. So what will happen is you might get one golf cart that parks in that space. So you're thinking that, okay, we're increasing 37 parking spaces, but we actually may not be when you combine that with the golf cart parking. So could there be a way of maybe a little bit wider car parking spaces where 2 golf carts could fit into that one space and painted in a way that it allows those people when they're parking, they can kind of see like it's a box or something that the golf cart can pull over, or you see the 2 stripes with the 2 boxes and the car can park directly over it. That way we can continue to try to increase the amount of parking that we're there, because what I'm afraid is that we're saying, hey, we're increasing parking spaces, but what we're doing is reducing the golf cart parking spaces, and then at the same time we may not be doing anything. And we're spending money on it, right? So I think we need to look at it very closely.
Yeah, absolutely. If the will of the council is to proceed conceptually with this, we would come back with a more cooked product. I will remind us that none of this is funded. The lift system alone is $260,000. The restriping is $220,000 approximately on Fernwood, and then another $20,000 for the Village Greenway. So perhaps the first decision is, do we want to proceed and make that investment? And then I can go back and figure out where we can fund this from. And if so, then perhaps award a contract and proceed.
I like the idea, and I think that we should start exploring maybe from the low-hanging fruit and work our way up and see what we can do.
Ed?
I'm all for the parking lists. I've had the parking lists. I've installed them the first time in a building 2005. So for 14 years, no problems whatsoever. In fact, it's one of the people that you have, Klaus, and been good service. People, they're very easy to operate. They're really basically maintenance free. That's why your maintenance contract is so low. and I would suggest we purchase those and eliminate the problems we have. Anybody goes to the community center and just goes round and round and parks illegally, or just pulls out of there, not at 7 o'clock in the morning, but different times. So it's just really terrible, especially later in the day. So I'd like to see us go ahead and purchase the, and since you've done the job and you've got the 2 bids, you're going through the evaluation, I'd like to make a motion that we purchase the parking equipment.
Councilmember Cigarola?
I'm all for studying all the alternative methods that we can create for parking and to go for the low-hanging fruit, as we're calling it. With all due respect to Councilmember London, I have to disagree on the lift, simply because for the reason that it's just a matter of time, if you ask me, that we close on the deal for the land to create the eventual parking garage. If we buy the lift system now, $260,000, and we close on the deal a year from now, we have to rip all that out to then build whatever's going to be built. That's well, that's reason number one. Reason number two is, given the aesthetic sensibilities of this village, I think if you put all that metal up there, it's going to look horrible, and people are going to complain, and people aren't going to like it. If the village was never going to buy that land, then I would give it more consideration. But because, in my opinion, it's at best a temporary solution, given whatever's going to eventually happen on that land, I'm just not for it. Sorry.
Michael, can I answer?
Yes, you can answer.
Basically, so the lifts, let's say for argument's sake, we did buy it in a year, which means be at least 3 years before we would do anything. The way we move usually, and you want to get permits, but planning, and you're going to get people to sign what to do before anything is really done. The good thing about the lifts, they're just bolted down. You just remove them. The way they're built, they're very few moving parts, very durable, and so we would basically be able to sell them to somebody else. The only thing we lose is the installation cost. But for the 3 years we have it, people would have parking spaces.
And there's
absolutely, excuse me. And then, I'm sorry, let me continue. You mentioned about the looks and everything else. When they're down, obviously, you don't notice them any more than anything else because they're flat on the ground. When they're up, the only thing you have is maybe 6 feet up in the air, the second car. And the idea is to put them in the center of the police parking lot. So basically, you have a buffer on both sides as far as the angle. Yes, from this view, you'd see them.
But one more thing, I'm sorry. From a practical point of view, the issue of having the lift 2 spaces in one, I see a practical problem there with people saying, hey, could you move your car so I can take my car down, and vice versa. Sure. It's for the employee.
This is going to be for the employees in the police parking lot. This is not for, we're supposedly there all day.
My opinion, I'd rather not spend the money now, wait to see what happens with the parking garage, and take it from there.
Councilmember Petros, then Councilmember Laredo, then Vice Mayor.
I see this as something that we should discuss in our strategic planning council when we go off and have a discussion and look at our priorities. We've been talking for many years about how we're trying to increase pedestrian traffic. I know we have parking congestion. I think we need to reach consensus first as a council of what we're looking to do. Are we looking to get people out of their cars, or are we looking to create more opportunities to use your car?
Are we looking for people to be able to use the community center? Are we going to say, no, we don't want you to go use your car for the community center, so don't use it. We built the community center for people to use. Now we're saying, well,
we want them to walk.
Car, go by your bike or walk.
I want them to walk there or bike there. And,
you want them to. That doesn't mean the people want to.
Okay.
Councilmember Laredo?
Thank you. I think just 100% to every word support what Ignacio just presented and supplementing, but I feel exactly the same. Couldn't have been expressed any better.
Vice Mayor?
I also think that I would like to continue to pursue the purchase of that property, but I had some questions about if we're only doing this lift, is that price, as Councilmember London said, just for the center parking spaces, 250,000 or for the whole lot?
So 262,000, which includes the installation and the 2 years maintenance for 22 units. What we had envisioned was perhaps putting most of them on the police parking lot side. There were about 4 or 5 that we were proposing to put on the fire side. There's some issues there with logistics and the size of the apparatus, so we'd need to kind of flush through that.
And that gives you 22 additional spaces?
Yes.
And the one-way option of Village Green Way for 20,000 was 7 additional spaces? Okay.
Council, I think that's, Councilmember Ramos.
What's the price per unit?
The price per unit, we actually also have the representative from Klaus here, but.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then, no, I want to know without the contract and the maintenance and everything, what's the price per
So
unit?
the maintenance is included. It only kicks in on year 3, so it's the 262 divided by 22.
Okay, and the 22 is each lift unit. It says not 22 spaces. but
Correct.
Each unit.
Right.
And they've already laid it out. How many spaces do we have in that row right now? Because I know these things are usually a lot larger than the actual spaces that are there.
So I'm Parks Rec Open Space Director Todd Hofferberth has been working on this project, so he can speak to some of those details.
'Cause what I want to know is what is the additional amount of spaces that we're getting for this?
22.
No, we're getting 22 units.
Yeah,
And
there's
each-
already
22 spaces.
spaces there. When you lift it up,
So you have the one that was
22
there and the
spaces.
one new one.
yes, but it is usually these machines don't fit an exact
They do.
space. They're a little bit
They do.
larger. Yeah, but you usually have the structures. I mean, we're installing them right now in a project, and they're not 8 foot 6 inches wide. They're more because you have the 2 tubes on the side that have to lift it up, and then you have to put the next one next to that, and it may kill 1 or 2 parking spaces in that row. Underneath. So I just want to know, what that difference is.
At City Hall, we would get 16 units in, creating 16 parking spaces. And we would be using the outside space is because of, when we met with the companies, they didn't think they could do it on the inside. I forget exactly. Do you remember what it was? It was I think it was the turning radius around the circle from the 2 parking spaces. Because these are going to be larger, much larger. They require a lengthier space than your average existing parking space. So even at City Hall, we would have to move the exit over to one side so we can accommodate them on that far side.
And and our spaces are what, 9 feet or 8 foot 6 wide right now that we have out there?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, and what I was trying to get to is what is the width that you need from one space to the next space?
So good evening. By the way, I'm a Klaus representative. I'm the Director of Business Development. I
I'm
brought
sorry,
this
your
prototype
name?
because a lot of you haven't seen it. It fits
State your name,
exactly.
please. I'm sorry, state
My
your
name
name.
is Alicia Beseña, Director of for Klaus. And it fits exactly into a regular parking space. So
What's a
the
regular
dimensions are going to be
dimensions?
8 by 16.
Okay, so smaller than a regular, because
Yes.
typically our codes are 8 foot 6, I
That's
believe,
correct. It's
by
8 foot
18.
6.
So that's 8, and then you can put one right next to it. So
Correct.
8 and 8.
The
Okay.
way they flush, you would mount them one next to the other.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay, so you wouldn't be overlapping. your existing
Well, we haven't installed them. We haven't bought them yet. So.
You leave your card. We're here for any questions.
Well,
Is there like
So,
a motion?
Vice Mayor
or-
McCormick wanted to finish
I
her
just
statement.
wanted, this goes way back, but I wanted to address the idea of trying to promote other types of movement around the village. And while I'm in total agreement, and the idea of losing tree canopy to me says you're going to lose walkers because it's too hot. I think there's also just at some point, we do have to acknowledge that there are certain demographics and certain times of day and certain circumstances where it is just not going to happen to have the majority of people out of their cars. And I think of it with people with a bunch of small kids. I think of certain kid rush hours and rush hours of seniors in the community center. And I think that we do need to find some additional parking.
But we're talking about the people who work for the city more than anything. So
Which
there's not
will-
really anything you can really do with that.
That's a different issue.
Yeah.
Somewhere else.
But then
Oh,
it
okay.
goes back to what are we going to do long-term in turn? And I like Katie's, Councilmember Petrus's proposal that when we have our strategic workshop, I think we have to talk about that piece of land because if we're going to spend money, we're talking about $260,000 for that. I think the property price last time was what, 1.4? And then if we're going to talk about, are we going to talk about buying it and putting a garage on there, or are we going to talk about just putting the lifts and we're going to be happy with it? But that's the conversation to have before we commit to the $262,000.
But I also think it's important to know that you can reuse these lifts. So
Yeah.
if you're putting a garage in,
Yeah.
you can make the ceilings high enough that you can also
That's
put
true
the
too.
lifts
Of course.
inside the
I
garage,
haven't been inside.
which doubles the amount of capacity you can
I've
put in there.
inside the building, not outside.
I'd like that bet.
I'll make a motion.
Bring this to the strategic plan.
Katie Petrus's suggestion, combined with Ignacio, that is, that we study this more and as alternative, and then we take it up at the strategic planning so that we don't make any significant investment with hodgepodge, sort of a strategic retreat.
Second.
Okay.
There was a motion originally by Councilmember London to purchase. It didn't receive a second, just to go in order here. And second, for Councilmember Laredo's motion for strategic planning and more studying.
Can we say our studying specifically going to be at our strategic planning session? So
Correct.
we have a defined end?
I would say the studying is done. I don't
Yeah.
think it's, I wouldn't advise any additional staff resources. I think there's more information that we have that we can present if need be, but I think what we have is sufficient for.
Maybe you
Do
can
you have
circulate it.
visual?
I do, I can
What it would look
circulate,
like?
yes.
I think that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you could circulate so we could study it
Sure.
before the strategic planning
And
session.
we'll circulate all the backup material and we'll circulate it with council.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item, undergrounding roadmap.
Why don't we start, well, let's go with Ed's, let's go with Councilmember London's discussion item first, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
About 6 years ago, when I got on council, I was pushing for underground electric, still been pushing for underground electric. We're about $600,000. We still don't have underground electric. We have dissension in the community. We have all kinds of talk. And right now, I really want to say that I don't think we should spend one more dollar on underground electric. I don't think we should do anything on underground electric because of the House bill and the Senate bill. Actually, it's supposed to be either voted on today or tomorrow. They're out of committee, at which point FP&L will be installing underground electric at their nickel. When I say their nickel, they're going to spend the money, then they'll get a return on that money, but that will affect the entire rate base of all their customers. Obviously, people in the inside of the state, AARP, everybody else obviously doesn't like the idea because their rates are going to go up because the rate base will go up. People like us and the coastal communities will like it because we're going to be the first ones to get it. So therefore, at this point in time, I'd like to not do the survey. I don't want to do any kind of cost analysis or cost anything with FP&L, spend another dollar. It's just a waste of money, in my opinion, at this point. As much as I wanted to do this before, I think at this point, the best thing to do, we have a lobbyist. He's involved with FP&L. I've discussed it with him. He thinks he can get us up to really help us move along with FP&L. So at this point in time, my point is stop doing anything else that spends any money in regards to the underground utilities.
Okay. Let's start Cigarola and work this way.
I have not had the same conversations with the lobbyist as Councilmember London, but I believe what he's saying is very reasonable. Given the fact that everything that's going on in the legislature right now could make all our efforts moot, it makes no sense to spend another dollar before we know what's going to happen. The mayor. The manager came today with a proposed timeline that we're going to debate. It was a very aggressive timeline, which I liked, but I think with these current developments, it's worth pumping the brakes, kicking back everything a little bit, giving till the next meeting to see what happens, and then start rolling.
Okay, yeah, let's just go around this way. Councilmember Petros.
Okay, just for a point of clarification first, my understanding was what's in the legislation is not to fully fund undergrounding by FPL. It's only the lateral lines, and it's not the feeder lines. So there would still, even if it passes, There's a significant
We have
portion.
2 feeders that would affect.
We have 7.
No, but 2 feeder, we have 2 feeders that, for the residential area, which is Fernwood and Crandon. The other feeders are for the, whatchamacallits, and they're underground, for the condominiums. So we have 2 feeders on the west side.
Actually, let me clarify. I had a meeting last week with the manager and with Public Works. We actually have 6 feeders.
7, I think.
The 7th one runs north into the marina. 6 that come into the village. But the vast majority of what is being considered in the legislature is the laterals, which is
a lot. All the backyards.
Which is the main thing.
It's not the backyards either. It's the lines that come off the subfeeders, and then from the laterals, you also have to pay to take it to each individual home.
Well, that's right, but that was a, yes.
Well, I mean, let's just be as clear as possible, given all the misconceptions about underground.
When the thing is through, that's why I say, at this point, to do nothing, we'll actually see the final legislation.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to make sure that we're clear about what it funds and what it doesn't.
Well,
that's going to be the final
We have to
thing.
understand, first it'll get in July, but in July it goes to one point, then it goes to the PSC, then it comes, we'll know really in January everything, but we'll have a better sense in July. But
In the pilot program, they're putting
I'm
everything.
sorry.
In pilot
I wanna cut
program,
you
they're
off.
paying for everything.
Go.
Well, and the pilot programs are only individual lines. It's not like they're taking communities.
I'm talking
and
about the areas that they're
undergrounding
putting
them.
them in.
Councilmember Lowe, let her
I'm
finish her
sorry.
point, and then.
Again, the pilot programs that we've heard about in the papers, given the meeting that I had with FPL, they said they're looking at the specific lines that have high outages. It's not as if they pick a community and put the community underground. So that's another thing that's important to know about that came out recently. I don't disagree. I agree that we should obviously wait and determine and see what they're going to do in the legislation. I do think there's some things that we could do in parallel that wouldn't mean not paying money, but we still need to be educated on potential financing options and how we might slice this project. And that doesn't need to be held up because we're waiting to find out. We can educate ourselves. We can look at that workshop so that when this piece comes in, we will already have kind of a blueprint of how we would do it regardless of the total cost.
Councilmember Moss?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Petros and Councilmember London. So I don't think we need to spend any more money until we know what's happening. Councilmember Petros mentioned that, there's certain things that would be included and not included. One thing I didn't hear is that we have communication lines that have to get buried, which are not going to be a part of this. So there's a lot of things that still need to be done on our end, but this would be the electrical utility line that we'll be putting in. I also think at the same time we should be working in-house with our administration in getting a somewhat of a timeline so we can be prepared on any education that we need to be doing. So I think this is a good start to have this kind of roadmap, but I know that this is going to affect the roadmap as well because we're going to have to shift time. But I think that, I love Gantt charts. I work with these all day long, but I think maybe 80% of the population, when they look at a Gantt chart, they may not understand it 100%. So, we might be able to simplify this a little bit more so that for the project's sake, so that on our end, we can start to put our own schedule together on policy decision making when you need when you need the money to start the project, we can put that together and we can always shift that. It's more of a sequence, what needs to happen and how much time do we need between these. If it needs to start on July, fine. If we need to move it to October to start, we shift everything over. It's fine, but I think we can take this time to just a blueprint of what we need to be doing in order that when we know what's happening, we're not scrambling trying to put all this stuff together at that time. But I agree with Ed London that we don't really need to spend the money till we know what's happening.
Councilmember Laredo.
Yeah, I agree, but let me just say I brought up this issue first, including to our lobbyist. So, and second of all, I tried 25 years ago to get it on the rate base when I was in the Public Service Commission. That's a long way from this bill. Number three, wait until the bill is finished because making sausages. Yeah. Legislation is making sausages. But if I understand London's proposal is that the authorization we gave upon Ignacio's motion the last time, authorizing an expenditure. What you're telling this motion, correct me if I'm wrong, is just to freeze that expenditure, but not negate that.
At this point, to do nothing.
Correct. Not spend that money that we already authorized.
Unless we decide to do it later.
Because we may not need it.
That's correct.
If that's the very clear thing, it's a prudent thing to do to wait until at least the 21st, but not, withdraw your original motion to get that approval. If that's the case, it's.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I think it's the prudent thing to do, to wait and see, obviously. I also discussed the pilot program and got the same answer, although I will say that in all the years that we've been talking about this and talking to FPL, I do find that when you ask a different person, you get a different answer. So I don't know if anyone up here has relationships with anyone that they can try to push, but I think Key Biscayne would be an amazing, true pilot program. We are a small, little community, our own grid, and we are amazing partners. So if FPL is listening, we do everything first rate, and we would love to be your pilot program.
Objectively speaking, I'm going to agree with every point you just made.
Thank you.
Councilmember London, did you have anything else to add?
No.
I know, one more thing from Councilmember Sararola, then let's take action.
I just want to modify, I guess, what my opinion is and what my recommendation. I still agree with everything Ed said, but with regard to what Katie said, I agree we shouldn't spend any more money with FPL and all of that, but as Brett and Katie said, there are still parts of this project that we're going to end up paying. We don't know how much, but we should still, we can still go forward without really spending any money, taking care of the housekeeping for whatever comes down the road. And by that I specifically mean we already have one remaining paid-for trip with our consultant, so which would cost nothing extra. We can have the finance workshop, which whatever amount ends up getting financed somewhere down the road, given all the changes, we can discuss all the different options and still come up with a roadmap, like Brett said, and then wait and see till the 21st.
Doesn't cost anything, why not do it?
I second Mr. London's motion.
Hold on, I do get to talk at some point. My only concern with that is, and I have no problem, if we want to do the workshop, will we get one shot with this Reftelis guy? And my question is, to your point, they're talking about they're only going to do the laterals. They're not going to do the connections to the houses, which frankly I think should be, in my opinion, should be handled like the sewer lines. People should have to hook that up. They should have to pay for that. So I don't know, because we don't know what we're going to actually have to be paying for. So I have no problem if we want to do it now. I wonder if we should wait until after we know, to Councilmember Laredo's point, what is the final legislation? What is the final thing that comes forward? So should we wait till fall or try and squeeze this in?
We don't know the number we're going to have to pay for, but the mechanisms are going to be A, B, or
Well, that'll
C or
depend
D.
on what we got to do, too.
Right, it depends on the work we have to do. That's my concern, is we don't,
To the mayor's point, one of the concerns that I have is, it's my understanding that the current way the mechanism is designed includes the cost of the hookup to the house, that it isn't set as individual costs. And it strikes me that as these numbers fluctuate and as the conversations go on, that may be a major change we would want. I would hate to use our one shot to have someone come and present something that we already have an inkling is maybe not the way that we would want the final thing.
So that's just the way I'm thinking about it. Because I get what and I think we need to educate people, but we're even further from the number than we were before. You know what I mean? Like we thought we were doing everything. Now potentially we're only doing connections and maybe a feeder or two. So yes, Councilmember.
I see this finance workshop a little bit broader, and it may not just be about undergrounding. It may be about resiliency.
Well, that's okay.
And so we have, and there's a misunderstanding in the community that we have sort of voted on how we want to finance this, and we really have not. And I think it would serve our community to be educated on these different options, and that we haven't weighed in yet as a body.
What's the?
There's a lot of people that think that we have just rejected special assessment, and we haven't, because we haven't actually seen the full program and we haven't compared it to other things. To me, we have three big umbrellas of potential resiliency, which is our beach renourishment, it's the undergrounding, and it's our water and sewer lines. And the sewer upgrades.
Stormwater upgrades?
Stormwater upgrades, excuse me.
Because you all of a sudden
Not
threw something
sewer,
else in
not
there. I'm like,
sewer.
oh, wait a minute,
No.
time out. Okay.
And so those may be part of our financing workshop
Great.
discussion. And I just feel like it would be really good for our community if we did this
Okay. Councilmember
sooner
Walsh?
rather than later.
Don't worry about it. Okay. Vice Mayor?
I think it's a great idea to do something where we talk about all of our big projects, and I think it all goes hand in hand with the fact that we're starting 2040, we're doing strategic planning ourselves. It makes perfect sense. I'm especially happy to hear talk about us doing this conversation in conjunction with the beach, because when it comes to misperceptions, I think we also have a misperception that we're going to definitely get additional funds for this beach, for the big beach project. And where I sit, we need the big beach project, whether we get included into the federal shoreline protection program or not.
That's right.
I'm hopeful we will. I think we've been really responsible at putting together an amazing team to make that happen. But whether or not it happens, this community has to address the needs of our beach, and it's going to be incredibly expensive if we have to go it alone. So I think it's the perfect time when we're doing all of this long-range planning to sit down and to say, these are all of the big expensive things that could be coming our way. Hopefully undergrounding comes down, hopefully the beach gets supported, but we really don't know.
And there's many communities that have done these resiliency bonds,
Right.
and that may be something that we're interested in doing. So,
I would agree with
May I make a motion, second Ed London's motion with the clarifications and addendums that hopefully the clerk took after loose by Ignacio and
I think
Katie?
those are more items, respectful. I think those are
Okay,
items.
but I take it to that we would freeze any expenditures.
doing it now, period.
Let's do it incrementally to
Period.
May
Yeah,
21st.
exactly.
And I want to throw a little bit curveball
Why
on
make
you.
it complicated?
No, just so that you keep in our process of education, even the best legislature that comes out still has to go to the Public Service Commission.
Right, well, that's.
So that you know what the timeline is going to be. But I mean, I would suggest that we freeze the expenditure of previously approved funds until May 21st, and then we'll revisit it at the time.
I would think it'd be even longer than that, just because it's not going to go to the PSC until July,
Well, that's-
correct?
The question
So,
is,
just
you're in the
review it.
PSC, what's the PSC going to do? Determine how they're going to charge for it, right?
Yeah,
That's what the PSC is going to do. The legislature is going to authorize them to do it.
They're authorizing the
That'll be in
general
January.
authority,
Yeah.
and then it's the PSC appointed by the governors of it to set that and who pays for it,
That's what I'm saying.
which is a
No,
ratepayer.
they said already who pays
And
for it.
that could be
They
a
said
long
that.
process
No, they said
because
that.
everybody in
So
there.
we've got a motion on the table.
If I may,
Yeah, bottom line is
if I can have
that
Councilmember
he
London repeat the
wants to defer
motion.
expenditures.
Just doesn't want to spend any money. I mean, this is
Just
not.
as many
Exactly.
money, second, got it.
Until further
The
notice.
Standing Ed London motion, no more money spending.
But can
All
I,
those in favor?
Aye,
Opposed?
okay.
Motion carries.
And
do we
just
have a
make sure you
timeline
make-
for the workshop?
Yeah.
That's also, excuse me, Madam Clerk, and you attach to the fact that we're not rescinding the previously authorized expenditure. We're freezing the expenditure.
Freezing.
Right.
No problem.
thank you.
Pausing. No problem.
And we still instruct the manager to come up with a timeline for the financing workshop.
Fine, but I do believe if we're going to talk about all these other projects, we should have our strategic workshop,
It
then
can
the
happen after
financing.
the strategic workshop, which is going to be, do we have a date yet?
Maybe we
That's
can-
coming up later on in the,
perfect sense to do it after
meeting
that.
under my report. I
So
added
maybe
it.
we'll table it till then and try
Right.
to set
Let's
one
do that.
for shortly after that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Ed, it's
Wait,
not
wait,
time to
wait,
go
wait.
yet.
I'm sorry, just so that I'm clear.
Yes.
It's too early.
We're talking about pretty major projects, and I would say
Okay.
with regard to the resiliency, if we limit it to those three areas, even within the beach project, I have a good sense of what the individual patch hauling projects would be. It will take us some time to develop some cost estimates as to what the longer-term breakwater, artificial reef, what those solutions may cost. So I think, just so I'm clear, so if we're doing the strategic retreat, which I sort of have a vision for, and I think May 18th is the date that we're looking at that, I'll point out that June 18th, I believe, is the budget workshop. So we're really right there. So I think it's important that we balance staff resources, and we want to give you excellent work product. And I don't want to rush through things that if we don't have a good handle on it, I don't want to bring you into a position where you don't, I want you to benefit from the workshop. So,
Madam Clerk, I'm a manager. I don't understand. First of all we just passed is a resolution for not disbursement of money. Period.
Right.
We got that clear.
Yes.
Okay, until further notice.
Yes.
We have a strategic plan session, which I guess is the 18th, which does not require you, at least as I understand it, you to have solutions or final numbers. It's for us to discuss strategically where we want to go. That would help you face us with your budget starting in June, the workshops. I don't understand why don't think that now all of a sudden, because of this discussion, you have to have it all ready on May 18th.
Right, so I was just clarifying expectations.
Talking more about timing of, I think I heard you, which is that we want to make sure there's enough time to get the information for a potential finance workshop, and maybe August is the month. I don't know. Let's wait until further in the meeting, and we can discuss that. I hear what you're saying.
Right. So what I was thinking, in addition to halting the expenditures, is that I could work with Councilmember Petros on what the workshop would look like, and I could work with Councilmember Moss on perhaps a redesign of the roadmap that might be more intuitive or might resonate more with the community.
Yeah. The key in successful management is to try to execute what you plan. It's not like they're not like straight lines. Oh, I'm going to stop and plan for 2 months and nothing happens. It's carrying forward parallel, complementary processes.
Right.
And I think one of the unstated, but maybe I think very sound suggestion from Ignacio and Katie is that also would help you and your staff prepare yourselves.
Oh yes.
Because let me tell you something, it's the elephant in the room. But let's say we get all the numbers right and we get 90% approval by all of our citizens, even, it's going to be a major disruption of everyday life in this community for the better. So, this will help, take us. This is why it was so healthy to get the report finally last time, because now we can move forward. The Underground Utility Commission did a great job. Now we have to execute. But don't get stressed about.
I'm not stressed. I just want to make sure we manage expectations.
I think it's clear now.
Okay.
I think it'll be probably more clear for you too, what we're looking for after the strategic planning retreat.
And by the way, very
We'll
excellent.
all be so refreshed.
I'm sure I speak for my colleagues. That was an excellent presentation on the underground roadmap that we requested.
Thank you.
Next item would be the items in the consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is an ordinance on second reading, an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, creating a village beautification board, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
I move it.
Second.
Thank you.
I just have one comment about this. As Ceci stated during public comments, one of the conversations I had with her, and Todd's not here, I guess I wanted to ask Todd, would we amend this ordinance to include an advisory role with regard to parks? It seems natural to me that the Village Beautification Board, if it's going to deal with greenery, it would also address any deficiencies in parks. But I understand, so up to now, we've been talking with Jake in Public Works, but we haven't really talked to Todd. I don't really see why there would be a problem with that, but.
I have some thoughts.
Go ahead.
First of all, I think that we need to make sure that our boards are working with us as a council and not necessarily with staff. We can't direct staff, and boards can't direct staff. So we have to be very clear on on that line because the staff is working for the manager. And then secondly, the Public Parks and Open Space Board, which was formerly the Land Acquisition Board. There's a real, we've got to make sure that those are distinctly different.
Perfect point. I see this new board dealing strictly with beautification. Just the grass needs more water, or trim this that way, or plant this here. Would that have any overlap, that you see any conflict with?
No, but if that, like, again, who are you sending that information to?
Well, the way it's been envisioned so far is the new board would have, regular meetings, and there'd be staff liaison that would attend, and they would discuss and create basically a priority list of the areas of the village that would need attention, A, B, and C, from most to least. And then that would go
to us.
To us or to the manager, one or the other for approval. And of course, it's envisioned that it's strictly advisory. It's not directing staff. It's not controlling staff. It's not bossing staff around. But that, I guess, I mean, to your point, you're right. There shouldn't be any overlap. But is there?
Well, I think the question lies somewhere in where does the newly named Parks and Open Space Board see their role within the parks? Is their role more of a programming role, or is it a facilities thing? Because for me, I certainly would see, if anyone saw the movie The Bridge, I noticed immediately when they were interviewing former council member Gross and kept trying to flatten his hair down, that there was a column at the gazebo at the park that had a bit of peeled paint like this big. And it was not really what I was supposed to take away from that movie, I understand, but I was like, oh, look at, there's no paint. And that strikes me as the kind of ownership on our village facilities that this board would be on top of. And the fact that it's within a park, should they then have to call the other committee?
No, not at all. And I think there is a very clear distinction, because my understanding of Parks and Open Space Board is about the acquisition of new land and then integrating that with the parks that we currently have and what are the high demands of usage. So it's much more specific to land acquisition.
And operations.
Not operations.
I mean, in terms of programming or
no, not programming. I mean, they could potentially make recommendations to us, I guess, about what direction parks are going or what communities are doing, and in that broad scope, but they're not looking to directly determine what programs
take place
that our staff should be implementing. I think they could come back and give us visions and thoughts, and then we can take that and ask our manager to do things, which is, I think, how we should be looking at the beautification. Gets a little stickier because it's really important. And we need to do this. We just need to come up with the right chain of responsibility, I guess.
Do we add parks to it or not? I mean, where I would see it.
I think beautification speaks to everything, doesn't it? So I don't think you necessarily need to add it because it's for all green spaces.
But then it include, just to understand that it would include the parks as is.
Yes.
Without adding the word parks to the ordinance.
I think it says very clearly.
Areas within the village in need of maintenance and upkeep.
I thought it said rights of way.
That was somewhere else.
No,
it
that's
says
two.
both.
One says projects for the right of way within the village, including but not limited to landscaping projects. 2, assisting the village manager or their designee in identifying areas within the village in need of maintenance and upkeep.
So
that's
that
super
would
broad.
include the park.
Of course.
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
we got you.
Councilmember McCormick.
Would you? I almost said the lady. Would you be more comfortable if there was language added in there that said sort of like assisting the village manager or their designee and advising council?
No. Excuse me, Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay.
First of all, the Parks and Open Spaces was fundamentally, and I don't know why we can't seem to agree on simple things, to change the name because we thought, first of all, it's more consistent with the industry, quote unquote. but it was fundamentally land acquisitions, not program. I mean, I don't know where we took a wrong turn. And open spaces, guess what they have? Trees, landscaping. So it's not inconsistent that they, which reports to us, because this we really did discuss at length, that they discuss, and today we had an excellent presentation, not the manager. They have a liaison who then reports to the manager, but they report to us separately. And we're only 4 or 5 of us here. You know, it's not like it's got to be too bureaucratic. I mean, so it should be interpreted as it was intended, which is beautify the island with landscaping. Wherever that landscaping is necessary, we have jurisdiction. And if that's okay with you, I move. I move it as
Should we
is.
clarify that then? 'Cause what it says is, it doesn't talk about council. If you look at 5A2, that's what I was asking, if she felt that it was too much circumventing council.
Well,
I mean, I'm comfortable with it because I think it's going to be the most efficient way to get things done, but.
But they have a liaison.
Yeah, but it doesn't say go to, or their
says
designee.
Designee.
Well, but he's not their designee, he's our designee.
Right, because every board has a liaison, I think it sort of does end up being a council.
But
Because it reports back to.
But I agree with the point that we don't want the boards thinking they have authority to go to staff,
Well, the only, well.
to direct. I agree with that point
My
100%.
understanding of this is that
We've gotten in the trouble
they
in the past.
advise the village manager, who can take that advice and throw it out or not.
No, they advise
Or their
us.
designee.
They advise us. They advise us. We advise the manager.
Well, this says.
And
the manager.
designee
Right, so I
is
agree with
staff
that point.
liaison, not council liaison.
Remind me, the other ordinances, aren't they basically written the same way as this?
No, but Ignacio, you're on a really important point, and I've had this discussion and a little bit of frustration. I really believe in legislative construction and just operation. There's a constructive ambiguity. It's very good for efficient government. We tend to to over-lawyer these things. And when you start putting things that are so specific, you run into these kinds of problems. I think it should be clear that it's to beautify our common areas. And it could be parks, it could be the parking lot, it could be all the other areas. It's just.
But that's not, the concern is, that's not really the concern is the areas. It's more, where do they report to? Why couldn't it be assisting the village council in identifying areas within? Just take that out and say assisting the village council in identifying areas within the village in need of maintenance and upkeep.
Modify 5A2 to.
Just assisting the village council. Strike
manager
manager
to
or their designee, just, and insert council.
Do you want to leave council or their designee to lead that
Or their
flexibility?
designee. Okay, so fine. So instead of manager, put in council.
The village
that
council
okay?
or their designee.
The other thing that I would change to make it a little broader, in 1, I would just say identifying and developing beautification projects within the village. Let's take out for the rights of way.
Yes.
So then it doesn't.
Does that make it more helpful?
No,
Okay.
that's fine.
I move it as amended.
That was identifying and developing beautification projects.
Within the village.
Village.
Strike for the rights of way
Right.
in 1.
Got it.
And strike manager in 2 and replace with council.
Right. Good.
Now they're going to start stepping on art in public
Okay.
places.
Mayor, you also need to open this for a public hearing. 'cause
I'm
the second-
sorry. I'd like
okay.
to open this for a public hearing. Anybody want to speak to this? Thank you for closing public hearing.
I move it
No
as
words
amended.
left
I second
on the
it.
subject.
And maybe it's not the right time, but the item that I added on to the agenda today, that has to do with landscaping, do you want to discuss it now or wait till the end?
Well, what, is it about this? What's
Can we pass this now or no? You don't want to pass it?
Yeah.
So let's call the roll.
Let's call, call the question.
As amended, roll call. Councilmember Petros?
Yes.
Councilmember Segurola?
Yes.
Mayor Davey?
Yes.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London?
Yes.
Vice Mayor McCormick?
Yes.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted on second reading. would you like to take up the item?
Yeah, why don't we
Councilmember
take up,
Sigurola's-
if everybody's okay, if no objections, let's take up Councilmember Segurola's item on landscaping.
Okay.
Ceci and Ed are here. What's that? Well,
This next one is still sitting there.
is anybody here waiting to talk on the advisory boards, amending the advisory boards? Okay.
I don't have any speakers signed.
Let's go to the landscaping.
Basically, what I want to discuss, talking to Public Works and talking to Ceci in preparation for the passing of this ordinance, Ceci brought it to my attention that back in around 2007, there was created a Vision 2020 landscaping plan.
Right.
Which had several recommendations, and apparently that just died along the way somewhere and was never actually adopted. I'm not expecting, to go in depth because it's a really big plan, but just for future reference, and since we're going into the budget season, that landscaping plan also, I think, recommended creating a village landscaping code. There have been several problems with the lack of depth to our current code with regard to landscaping in terms of somebody
Cutting
rips out
trees
a
down.
tree.
One of the big
and no
issues was we
fine.
had big trees then. Didn't somebody go down and whack a bunch of trees right on
Yeah.
Harbor?
And no
Yeah, I
real,
remember.
no real
Okay.
consequences. Yeah. So somewhere down the road, we should discuss the adoption of the plan, the creation of a landscaping code for the village, and also there was a recommendation for the creation of a position as a village horticulturalist.
We brought
which-
somebody in.
Which would need to be budgeted for. So just putting that out there.
We already budgeted it. It was budgeted back then.
No.
You have the money.
There,
Okay.
It was
All right,
designated
well,
for
what they need to do
contractors.
is-
Just did it again.
Fortunately, they have a liaison on council that they can discuss this with and get a plan of action, and then that liaison can come back to council with
I
that.
make a suggestion. Do you want to pick a time right now for however many months down, either before budget, after budget, to put this on the agenda? At least the discussion of the plan, so it'll
I'll
come
put it
to
on-
all of us.
I'll put it on the next one, May 21st.
Fine.
If I could just make a point of clarification,
Sure.
Councilmember Sigurella, I think what you're actually saying is a tree preservation ordinance, because we have a landscape code. That's what, do you want to preserve the trees, right? That's what
Well,
you're talking about? And
we-
if they rip them out, like the fines and the teeth and all that, correct?
Yeah. I want to expand on what we have. I think there was an example that if you rip out a tree that costs $15,000, the largest
Right.
fine you can put is $200. So hey, rip it out. Who cares? I'll pay the $200. That kind of stuff, to expand on that, to create consequences if people go down a road we don't want them
Right, because there's two, just for clarification for everybody, for terms of our purposes, we have a landscape code, and then there's a tree preservation code, just so, as it goes.
Proper
Correct, and it also impacts, the county has jurisdiction and over both, actually, is providing the minimum standards, but just going forward.
To your point, reading over the charter, way back when we were incorporated, the charter says that we adopt the Miami-Dade County plan until such time as we create our own. So I'd like to go ahead and
But
create our own.
tree demolition permits and things like that. I mean, you're talking about when people who don't have the permits, right? Or because the permits
No,
we go through
everything
is through
goes
Durham
underneath-
and everything like that. through the
Did I
county.
open this for
but
public comments already, and somebody didn't speak?
Yeah, is there, I'm sorry if I don't understand how we work. Didn't we just create a committee and now the next step is for all of us to give you recommendations?
Well,
And that
we're
would-
having
that
the
would-
discussion item on
Oh,
the,
no, I mean, that would be their work.
Well, no, this will be by council, because the council would have to adopt any master plan, the horticulturist, all those things the committee couldn't do. I'm just throwing
Why
it
don't
out
you
there.
guys bring it back to us?
Correct.
Recommendations.
Ceci, come on up to the podium.
Judd, at some point in time, several years ago, Judd came to us, a committee of three, and told us that Durham, and this is what I understand, Durham was requiring that either, I think, our code or our I don't know what is what you call it, but it had to be stronger, that we were not complying, we had to do something about it. What happens, I believe, is that when people want to demolish houses and there's a big tree there, and if it's a native tree, since our code is not strong enough, they have to go, we send them to DERM. Now, DERM maybe allows them to cut that big tree down, and they keep
Okay,
their money.
But we want control.
We want control.
Fine, so that's what we're
And
looking
we've been
for.
waiting for about
Okay.
3 years,
Okay.
and
That's all I needed.
supposedly Ana de Varona was taking care of that. We were kind of copying the Pinecrest code and adapting it to us.
Okay. Thanks, Essie.
Thank you.
To be determined, I'll bring it up at the next meeting.
Beautiful. Let's move on to the next item.
And can we get a copy of that plan
Yeah,
in the interim?
I believe it was just given to me in PDF version of the
It's not just on landscape.
the Vision 2020
It's the
master
2020,
plan,
the whole
landscaping
Yeah,
master plan.
it's a big landscaping.
Specific to landscaping, separate plan.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
No, but let's see the landscaping plan.
I just received it by PDF. I could forward it to
Send it to the,
everyone.
send it to the clerk and send it around. Thank you.
Next
I don't want to
item,
get the whole
Sounds like we're
thing,
gonna
just the
need to start
landscape.
reading it.
next item is a second reading ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Section 2-10 Advisory Boards of Chapter 2 Administration, Article 1 in general of the Village Code of Ordinances to provide for board membership and term limits, renaming existing committees to boards, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
I'd like
I
to,
need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to ask for your consideration. Something that last time when we discussed this, and we've spent a lot of time, we let go because, with so many things. And is that I very strongly believe, and every day more, there's so much talent out there that we put into this, the no more than one committee I'll say a person per committee. And perhaps the best way to do that is to say that and say, except as otherwise approved by unanimity or something of the village council rather than the open. I don't believe we are making enough room for new people, and we have a 4-member new council, and we represent people that have talent, and I want to broaden the pool of people that we can approach about it. And unless there is an overwhelming, and I forgot what the word is in another court ruling, an immigration law, incredible talent that is irreplaceable, we can make that exception rather than leave it open and then we have people on 1 or 2 committees. It's just simply not fair.
All right, Councilmember Moss?
Yeah?
It's called exceptional.
Exceptional abilities, right?
Would you recommend making exceptions for the people who are already on more than one board, or are we going to remove people from boards?
I think people would understand. I mean, I don't understand why, I mean, we're trying to make this process more open. We're trying to make, and we're trying to bring more people to be engaged, the doers. And even as a councilman, I haven't gotten one appointment anywhere.
All right, Vice Mayor McCormick?
And I got elected just like all of us here. I mean, it's not like we have a quota, but I just see so many good people out there, and we need to get them starting engaging.
Vice Mayor McCormick?
I completely agree with you that it's amazing when we get new people and that there are many, many people in this community that are not engaged. And I would love to see more of them engaged. My concern comes with literally codifying it and creating other issues down the road. I wonder if there's some way to put in sort of the spirit of it, like it is recommended that the mayor not appoint someone to an additional board when there are other people available. Do you know what I'm saying? As opposed to sort of tying hands and starting to throw people off. I think when whenever possible, I think you should put a new person on and not someone who's already on a bunch of other things.
Right.
But I don't know that it is always possible. And when we put things into an ordinance, it's then there until someone bothers to go in and change it.
Well, I don't understand what is, it really perplexes me sometimes. What is the objection of limiting to one committee? I mean, do we have people who want to serve in several committees? Is it not enough? I mean, even as it becomes our representative elected officials, I mean, don't we have every 2 years 4 people get elected? Don't we have a fresh approach to not to throw people out? I have supported every appointment suggestion that you had made. I have supported a lot of people since I've been here 3 or 4 months. I've been on boards. I'm not suggesting replacing anybody on the landscaping. Well, landscaping, we're about to make recommendations. I really think that it quite exactly your argument in the reverse. It leaves a major loophole that at the last discussion, I backed off because I thought, I'm always trying to build consensus. But I really don't see, unless there's a compelling talent, in which case we can make the argument. Okay. We would waive the rule by a majority.
Would you build in that unless there are no other interested people? Right? Like, because that does happen.
I can guarantee you that there are people who want to serve.
Councilmember Moss.
I just think we should bring this to a vote and let's move on.
I mean, I'm inclined to go with Vice Mayor McCormick just because I know. I mean, frankly, there were times where I was on 2 or 3 committees and being appointed a magistrate. And I understand your point. I agree 100%. We need more and more people to be involved. But there are times where it doesn't happen and you have shortfalls on board. I think we're coming into a good time where we as a council should be mindful and say, look, that person's already on that board, so that's a consideration we should be taking. But I don't want to codify something that says you absolutely cannot be on more than one board. So I would vote no. So I'm happy to take the vote. And
you have
what
a
about
motion
2?
with that amendment?
Can we do something
already on the table?
Where we're making sure we're being somewhat true to that
that's
idea?
That's kind of the point. We're already making sure that, like, one of the objections is, if somebody comes up and I put that name forward and you guys say, well, that person's already on a board, you're gonna vote no against that person, and we'll come to some. I mean, I'm inclined to your way of thinking of broadening this and recommending people who aren't on other boards, but I just don't. I agree that codifying it just doesn't. I appreciate the spirit of it. I just don't think legalizing it.
Then why do we have a whole meeting on boards? Why do we need this resolution? Let's just then don't do it as we wish. I'll tell you, I don't believe in quotas. But each one of us 7 here who have equal power and equal representation, and people we represent because we put our ideas out to get our votes. Sometimes I don't get to make any appointments, and that's not very representative, and it's not necessary. We do have a lot of talent, and you could have a clause that says if there is nobody else, or because of that, the council can overrule the rule. So at the same issue of codifying it, but in the reverse.
Make your motion for the amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to amend that this advisory board be amended to that no more than one person, unless otherwise approved by council, specifically a majority.
Can't serve on more than one advisory board.
Cannot serve in more than one. And by the way, I also like to make sure that this language, I think I might have mentioned that to the attorney, that there's no conflict. That there's no conflict of interest. Or at least it is close, and people who serve on boards, because I'm very much for transparency. Sometimes things sort of slip. But the gist of it is what I withdrew the last time when we had this discussion on the first reading.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Mayor Davey?
No.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London?
No.
Vice Mayor McCormick?
No.
Councilmember Moss?
Yes.
Councilmember Petros?
No.
And Councilmember Segurola?
No.
Motion fails.
We have to open the public comments for the ordinance. So we'll open. Anybody want to speak to this? Okay, I'm going to close public comments.
I don't have any speakers signed up.
Can I make a motion, though, to add the one part of Councilmember Laredo's motion to add language of establishing that there's no conflict? Or no?
I don't
Or
have
can we talk
I don't
about
have a
it?
problem with that, but isn't that already sort of
Is it
in the
implied?
law somewhere?
It's already.
It's in there?
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
subject to the conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Call the question.
It's already
Thank
in
you.
Need a
there.
motion and a second on the table.
I
We
already
don't have one.
motioned on the ordinance.
From the original?
From the ordinance, yes.
Okay.
I-
With no amendments.
No amendments.
All right.
Councilmember Laredo,
No.
Councilmember London,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McCormick,
Yes.
Councilmember Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Councilmember Segurola,
Yes.
Mayor Davy.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted on second reading. Next item, under reports and recommendations, mayor and council members, composting, Mayor Davy.
Okay, I'm going to pull composting because I was told by somebody a little earlier that somebody's going to make a presentation to us in 3 weeks on composting on the Key. So let's keep that conversation for that night. I will add, just because I forgot to mention in brief comments, May 17th, we have the 4th of July barbecue. That's May 17th. So let's make sure that we're all there in attendance if we can make it. It's a great event. We always have a lot of fun. Ed gets a little crazy, but you know, it's a good time. Ed Sanchez, not Ed London, although I've seen Ed London get crazy too. So show up if you can. It's a great event for
And
our
you
4th
buy
of
the
July
tickets
parade.
online and they're discounted now.
That's right. Thank you. And you can buy them from people. You should probably buy them from somebody sitting on council with you who's on the advisory board, on the committee, which is not a council committee.
Next.
Let's go.
Next item, in-house village attorney, Councilmember Segurola.
Well, I put this item on the agenda because I wanted to get the council's feedback. Weiss Serota has been with us since the beginning, 1991. I think the firm has grown with the village of Key Biscayne. Not to take away from anything that they've done for us. The issue that I see is the village has grown and evolved to a point where I think we would be better served by an in-house attorney. The reasons are the following. First, and only one of various equal reasons, is the numbers that I circulated through the clerk to each one of you. They're not perfect, but basically what I did was I went back to the budgets that are on the village website, and I pulled all the information that I could on budgeted versus actual spending on attorneys from 2002 to 2018. There are a lot of instances where I couldn't find the actual. I just found projected or through a certain part of the year. I think those numbers, what they show is, first, the increase in the budget for attorneys. We start off at $253,000 in 2002, and we end up at $1,210,000 currently. Of course, the village's legal needs have changed and grown, and we've become more sophisticated, and we're dealing with many more issues now than in 2002. But strictly from a budgeting point of view, I see the following problems with that. Number one, it's very hard to budget. If you see the budgeted amount to the actual or projected spent amount vary from year to year. So when we're creating a budget, we don't really, we're creating a guesstimate. That is a problem. Number two, from a budgeting point of view, in terms of an attorney, knowing what it takes to run a law office, the village, if it had one attorney using some office space and all the additional overhead, would cost way less than $200,000 a year, in my opinion. That attorney, that in-house village attorney, I believe could handle 80% plus of all our needs. If not 100, because you're always going to need special counsel for one thing or another, but can handle way more many things. For a fixed cost that would just basically be salary, benefits, and whatever overhead you assign to that person. If you add an assistant, you're talking maximum $50,000 extra. So, I mean, if you go crazy, it won't go over $250,000. And that will be a fixed amount every year. Now, aside from the budgeting benefits of that, you also have the fact that if you have an attorney with an office in the city hall, they're down the hall from the manager and whoever else needs a legal opinion on anything. It's literally just a matter of walking over and say, hey, can you do this? You're not getting billed by the hour. You don't have to worry about sending something out and waiting for it to get back. It's instantaneous. The other issue is, as has happened with Weiss Serota, naturally, because the firm has grown and has become very successful, that we have the issue of conflicts. They have had a consistent conflict with the city of Miami. Our two neighbors are the city of Miami and Miami-Dade County. We will continuously deal with them, and Weiss Serota will be conflicted out. And we will continuously, as long as that continues, we will continuously need to go out and get special counsel. That's a problem. With regard to outside counsel, many times if the village gets sued and we have insurance, the insurance company either names an attorney or reimburses an attorney that they select. So I don't really see that as being a problem. With regard to any specialties, that may be necessary to retain special outside counsel for very specific jobs, which I think the cost would be not a whole lot, especially when you see the budgets as they've grown over the years. In a nutshell, I think the village of Key Biscayne has reached the point where we can have our own in-house attorney, and that person will have no conflicts, loyalties directly to the village, nothing on Weiss Serota, and in the same building as all our staff and manager. I only see an upside. The one caveat, the one detail that hinges on whether or not having an in-house village attorney is viable is the quality of the candidate that's selected. That comes down to us, the council. I imagine if we do go down this route, we would have some sort of search similar to what was done to get a manager, and it would come down to picking the right candidate, someone who knows municipal law, someone who knows the different things that we deal with on a daily basis, and the success or failure of that in-house counsel will depend on the man or woman that's selected for that job.
Mike? Vice Mayor?
So when you're looking at the budget things, some of the questions and concerns that I have are how much of that budget is sort of general counsel work versus special counsel work, right? Like when I look at this, I wonder, are we looking to hire someone to manage our special counsels? Or because in my time being here, the attorneys that I've dealt with have been many more, right? Like our legal counsel for litigation, clearly our labor counsel. We've spent a lot of time and money with him, and that is outside of the scope of
Labor's under Weiss Serota.
But it's not Chad, right?
Yeah.
So if we were to hire someone to sit here, we would still need Brett or whoever it would be. And so I think this is something, it's always important to look at things, and I'm not one way or another on it, but these are the questions that come to my mind, are clearly the question of how much of that budget is actually our sort of general counsel work. And I don't think that you have that data yet, but clearly we need it. Other thoughts, you spoke to the quality of who you're going to have, right? So to me, that question is bigger than just who we're going to interview. It's what are we going to pay them?
Yeah, I'll let you respond.
Can I respond to after each person speaks, just because it's a lot? Unless I start.
Sure. Yeah, that makes it easy. That'll make it easier for you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And my last is that I would be very curious to look at sort of our municipal peer group, right? Like, what do other municipalities like us with our budget and our sort of needs, and what are the things that they see as best practices with regard to this, right? Like, clearly, the city of Miami is not our peer group. Miami-Dade County, also not our peer group. So those are the pieces of information that I would need to be able to really participate in this conversation. Excuse me.
To respond to the numbers, you're absolutely correct. This was just a quick and dirty calculation to give an idea of the general projected numbers. I will go further in depth to find out what is just general counsel and what's special counsel. With regard to what you said about hiring special counsel, absolutely. But the special counsel you will need to hire, aside from the in-house village attorney, will depend on what are the strengths and weaknesses of the candidate we hire. Because if we hire someone that's a specialist in litigation, then you won't need to hire a litigator, a special counsel. If you hire someone that has a stronger suit in labor law, you won't need a labor lawyer. It all depends on who you pick. And that would be part of the selection process. With regard to what you said about best practices and similar municipalities, I absolutely agree. I do know for a fact, if you follow the news, a lot of the, Indian Creek or other tiny villages, much smaller than ours, have their own in-house attorneys.
Steve Elfman's.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Then it wasn't the Indian Creek. It was
I've heard of them.
Somebody else.
If you want, I can just give you that. I mean, there's 34 municipalities, 26 of them have firms, and 8 have city attorneys. So,
okay.
You want me to, I can tell you.
And
that.
Tell me
Who are they?
The
City
8,
of Miami.
So the
Coral
8 are
Gables.
Coral Gables,
Hialeah.
Doral, Hialeah, City of Miami, Miami Beach, Miami Gardens, North Miami Beach.
Ed, did you have?
Well, wait, what was it? You had one more
No, it's
point
just
that I
a
didn't address to.
Sorry.
Did I miss one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I gotta think of it again.
Cost, fee, or
Oh.
salary.
Yeah, but
Oh, salary. Lawyers don't make anywhere near as much money as people think they do.
Or isn't that the truth?
You know I'm married to one, right?
Except the ones that get
yes.
this game.
Well, yeah.
But, yeah, right.
But lawyer, and I know people who are city and county attorneys, and yes, some make a ton of money. Others, the average salary is not as high as you would think it is.
Not at all.
So that's why that's what makes it feasible. And honestly, a municipal job is a very desirable job for a lawyer, because you're basically looking at a 9 to 5 with a lot of holidays, a lot of benefits, and no billing. So there are plenty of lawyers that will take less money for a much higher quality of life than if they go work at some big firm. That's what makes it a viable option.
Ed?
I guess my concern each time I saw the budget was how much same thing you're talking about, how much we spend on lawyers. And when you talk about budget, I don't think it really matters, because our budget, you said a guess, everything we do is a guess in the budget. We usually always overestimate, underspend, we pat ourselves in the back. We're doing a great job. That's our standard procedure here. We underestimate the revenues, more revenues come in, we pat ourselves in the back, and we're doing a great job. But the question is, do we use the lawyers too much? And the reason I bring this up, and I hate to bring this up again, but 2 things. One, 4 or 5, 6 years ago, every time the lawyers would come, we were purchasing things, we're acquiring things. And why can't we just have a template to use ourselves? Why do we have to go to Weiss Serota every time we buy something? And how much do we spend maybe on purchasing, procurement? You look at the bills. What did you spend last month on legal for procurement? Do you have any idea?
So Chad and I have talked about this. So over time, one of the things that I noticed, and we've taken actions on
Right.
staffing on my side to address this, there was a bill that I looked at, and between procurement support alone
Yeah.
was almost 10,000 in
Yeah,
that
that's
month.
what I'm talking about. It's crazy.
But we
I'll
have
let her
changed. So one of the things that we did was we reclassified a position and brought somebody on board who's capable and experienced with the procurement. So hopefully we'll shift some of that cost back
You have
to
a
us.
template, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we buy something.
Right, the templates
And then the
is a
other
good
thing which
idea.
really upset me, as you know, was our good old drones. I mean, we tell, hey, do this, and the lawyer does this. We educate them, so we spend $20-some thousand for them to learn how to register drones. Now, nobody has any control of that, at least in the past. I'm sure now Andrea does. So we spend money, and as other people call the law firm besides you, and tell them to do things? Any other people?
That's also something that we've been working with Weiss on when.
In the past?
I can't speak to before I was here, but since I've been here, we have tried to bring back business decisions to the management side and let legal focus on their role. So we've been working on trying to reduce cost on our side.
So the reason I'm bringing this up, Ignacio, the question is, do we need even a full-time attorney? I mean, I don't know if we have full-time work for an attorney. And maybe we still consider using Weiss Serota, but only using them where we really need them, or if you don't want to use them, somebody else, rather than say, okay, fine, just keep business as usual.
In my opinion, even if you have a lawyer sitting in an office in Village Hall twiddling their thumbs for a portion of the day, we're going to save a ton of money.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Right.
I'll take that
Councilmember
job.
Moss?
And I think you want to find, if you
I
go
think
this direction, you want to find
somebody
quality
auditioned for the
too.
job today, didn't they? Tonight I heard a background of CV.
Nothing. Keep going.
I was just
Councilmember
going to
Moss?
say that whether it's full-time or part-time, you're looking for quality, so you need to offer something.
Yeah, it all comes down to the quality of the candidate.
Yeah. Chad, you said that Doral has their own in-house now, attorney?
Correct.
They didn't before, though,
No.
right? They had Daniel. Dan was there, right?
So we had represented Doral, but Doral had felt that the mayor had felt that he wanted to bring in in-house and create a city attorney department. So that's what they did.
Okay.
So,
I would look-
and by the way, if I could just address maybe some of Ed's comments, and I'm happy to address comments as we go, but just as to the procurement, I mean, we have tons of forms. Some things might be more complex than others, but we have consistently tried to push things back on the staff. Sometimes things come back to us, but I have to tell you, since Andrea started, that's one thing that we had.
Good.
We have really strided to do that, and I think she's hired people, and that's something we do in other cities.
Good.
As to like the 9 to 5 job, I was kind of laughing because, and she could laugh too, because we're on the phone at what time usually?
7:38 a.m.
So, I mean, it's not 9 to 5, but anyways, I could go through all these as they come. I'll just hang back and whatever you guys.
Could you cut back the use you provide us?
I'm sorry, use of.
Using your firm. Do we really have to use your firm like we do today? Or were you overutilizing you?
Well, I think.
The things we don't need.
I think over the years, we have provided additional support. I think that we're happy to take a step back and focus on legal, as Andrea said. A lot of times in the past, we have been thrown into really negotiating business deals when we really didn't want to be doing that, but because, we've been kind of thrown a contract and a proposal and it's just the way it worked. But I think Andrea and I have had a lot of conversations about trying to change kind of the dynamic and the interaction between our office and the village. As to who calls us and talks to us, I could tell you that it's a very limited amount of people. We don't speak to anyone except really the directors. We're talking the police chief, fire chief, the manager, parks director, HR, and the community development director. Is that so? And now Tom, who's the procurement and assistant to the manager. So it's not that we're having a broad range of conversations with, the entire village administration, and we talk to the village clerk. So I do think that things are changing, and I think that we have really made a lot of good strides as far as trying to address some of the issues that you've discussed, Ed. I can go. I'll wait. Go ahead.
Okay. Councilmember Petros.
All right, a few comments. I like the idea of talking about this. I think it's something to consider. I do think we need to remember that our manager's relatively new, and Weiss Serota does have significant historical knowledge of this village, and they've served our community for many years. And I think this is almost like a mini evaluation component that we're having a discussion up here, and hopefully we haven't had formal evaluations of our charter appointees, but we just went through this process. I know I had a conversation specifically with Chad about the things that I would like to see in the next year happen. And I also know from a budget perspective, I've had conversations with Andrea about this idea of budgeting in a much more true form. And I think some of these numbers and concerns that you're talking about historically could go away, for lack of a better term. I think we could be more diligent, and maybe we need to be conscious of when we're calling for an attorney. I think when you're a small village, I do think there's some benefits to having a firm. Some of the benefits, first of all, Weiss Serota charges a very low rate to our community because they've grandfathered us in. They sit at our meetings at no cost to our village. I don't know if people realize that. No. And so as far as an hourly rate, we're not billed for the time that they sit up here on the dais. And if we have needs that expand and contract, when you have someone outside, you can manage that better. So I think we should be considering that fact. And also, bringing in employees is never just about the dollar amount that you're paying them. And if you bring somebody in, there are things that you have to manage in that side too. And if we're appointing a village attorney, there's a lot of things that come into play with an appointment too. And there's 7 of us up here, and it may or may not work out that well, and you don't necessarily know. So I think it's something that, number one, we should also take some time, given the transition this village has been through recently, to consider. Maybe this year is a year to really look at this, and also have good communication with the council that has represented us well, and see if they can respond to our needs and our concerns, because we've never given that kind of feedback and allowed the firm to respond to it.
Councilmember Laredo, do you want to say anything?
I'm 100% in agreement with Katie has said. I think that as to Ed London's comments, I want to remind ourselves that we have a charter, and the responsibility is ours and before us. I'm here just a few months. Some of you have been here, been councilmen and been served before. But whatever dissatisfaction you've had, it's the responsibility of this full council to make sure that those expenditures are not excessive. And I take that responsibility serious. Second of all, just so that you know that in government, and we'll have an opportunity perhaps on this retreat, that the trend in efficiency, which I ran on and I intend to be focused on, in municipal government is outsourcing. And there are plenty of good examples of cities very well run, extremely well run, that have 10, 20 employees in total. So just in terms of historical proven experience. Second of all, I'm conscious of the low rate, and I also think this is such a strategic decision that strikes right at the heart of how we found it. And of course, the institutional memory, as you highlighted before, is very valuable and tangible. And so I think I welcome the discussion, and I continue as much as you can, but I don't see this as a panacea that it may seem at the first sight.
I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in. I agree with you. I think we need to look, I think, to the point of we need to review, but it is on us. We're the council. We can't lay this off on, it's not the attorney's fault because they're charging us because we're calling them and having them do this work. That's on us. So we have to be better. I would like to see an analysis of how much we do spend, because we use them for land use, we use them for municipal work, we use them for employment, labor, procurement. There have been a lot of areas. So I think we need to look at that, because if we did bring somebody in-house, then we would have to consider, okay, because that person is going to have a specialty. We all do. And they'll have that specialty, but they'll have to outsource for other things. So I think, and I also agree with the point, we have a new manager who's working well with our council, and we're adjusting things and we're moving. We've got a lot of pieces on the move. We're coming into a new budget season. Let's see how this year goes, and let's keep evaluating. But I think it's a valid conversation, but I think at this point, I like, yes, sir.
No, you're done.
Okay, no, I think that's it. I don't want to belabor the point.
Following up on your point, and I also, with Ignacio, I understand where he's coming from. why don't we look for the next, since Andrea has been here, until the budget thing, and see if in fact our utilization has gone down and our cost has gone down, because maybe we used them excessively before, we're not doing it now. Maybe there's no controls before, we just use them, like you say, for negotiating this, for doing stuff there's no reason to use them, that we can do ourselves at a much less expensive rate. So I would like to say, you just postpone it for a few months and bring it back.
If it's all right with the council, then I'll just find out more information and report back.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great idea. I'm sorry, do you have anything else?
No, I was going to say what it's.
I would say that the budget that's going to really show this, though, is not this year.
Right, it's
Because
next
this was
year, right.
not our new manager's budget. It's going to be the budget
No,
coming
I'm
out
saying
of
with
the fund.
expenditures that she's had since she's
Fair
came
enough.
here with the council, with
Yep.
using Weiss Serota.
That's fair.
Let me just make a clarification on that point. There are independent branches of government under our charter. So let's don't put the burden on our manager to justify the efficiency of the village attorney. I know that's not where you were going, but I understand.
I don't
but
understand
want-
what you're saying now, hold on. What are you saying?
Next item.
The village manager.
Next item.
Excuse
Mayor
me, Mayor, if you interrupt me one more time,
What?
you really are incapable.
Trying to move the, I'm
I-
incapable
Okay,
of what,
why
sir?
are you interrupting me, sir?
Because you're going on, you
I know,
can
no,
have
no,
this
but
conversation.
who are you to say who I'm going on?
I run the meeting,
What,
sir.
You run the meeting?
I run the
Are you
meetings.
the
I've
king of
determined-
Key Biscayne?
No, I'm certainly
You're
not,
just
but I am
one
the
of
chair
us,
of this-
sir. You just haven't gotten
I still
yet.
run the meeting,
Do you
sir.
read the charter?
Sir, yes, I do, as a matter of
Okay,
fact.
so you try to stop
Yes.
me from participating in the people
No,
who
what
voted me
I'm
here.
what I'm trying to do is
I'm
move the
having a
meeting along.
conversation with my fellow
That's right, and you
councilman
can have
to
that conversation
clarify.
off-
So
off-
you just, no, I'm going to do it on the record, sir, because we have something called sunshine. You don't know about that?
Okay.
Okay, we can't have it. So stop interrupting me because you're being disrespectful
No, I'm not
to
being
me.
disrespectful at this point.
And
You're
I
the
have
one who's been
just some little
disrespectful.
patience with you. I think you're being very immature,
Well, that's
and you
your
haven't
opinion,
grown
sir.
very much.
Okay,
And I
thank you.
represent a lot of people who voted for me,
understand.
and you're not going to shut me up.
You're right.
Okay?
Yes.
Ed, what I meant to clarify, and I know that you did not mean that, is that your analysis is a very good suggestion, that she come up as a time period to see how much efficiency we gain, but not to make that her responsibility because she does. Okay, no, I just wanted to clarify. That's all. That's all. It was as simple as that, to clarify for the record.
Are you done over there?
Absolutely.
Let's move on to the
Next
next item.
item, Ultra, Mayor Davey.
Yes, so we have May 9th coming up. They'll be making a vote as to whether or not Ultra's coming back to Virginia Key. I advocate that as many of our residents are there to speak out. I would like to confirm with council that we're standing with the same position, that we are against Ultra on Virginia Key, that we think it's not the right place for Ultra, and we want them to move along. I think is that correct? Can I make that statement?
Yes. Do you think it's helpful to have our residents come speak at their meeting at this point?
It's a waste.
I think it can. It can be helpful. I think it was helpful at the Virginia Key Advisory Board meeting. I think it was helpful to have people there talking to the members of the board. I think they really, they take it to heart. They listen. So if we can sway, look, I think Commissioner Carollo came out against it at the last meeting. So if we can get two more to come out against it, I think we can get it off Virginia Key. Councilmember Segarolo?
My position has not changed since the last time I
Just
gave
confirming.
a great speech that Ed liked.
That was when you were running for mayor.
Yes. I completely agree with Ann Tainter, who was here before and commented. I think if we roll over on this, we will never be taken seriously again, and we will never have any say whatsoever in what happens to our driveway. I'm not going to repeat everything I said last time because there's no point. Right now, the ball is in the city of Miami's court. And May 9th, the more people that go and express their feelings, the better. And let's see what happens, and we'll decide what we do after that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
is the advisory board for it or against it?
They voted against it. They did vote 5-4 against it. Several of the members who voted again, it was a resolution to oppose the return of Ultra to Virginia Key. There were 4 votes against the resolution, which means they were sort of in support of Ultra. But a lot of the comments made by those members were to the effect that they felt Ultra was getting sort of a short shrift by being forced out of Virginia Key after being forced out of Bayfront. That's kind of the gist I got from the conversation.
So they're not
But-
paying attention to them either, right?
well,
Their
we'll
own
see.
advisory board is not paying attention.
No, they certainly have not in the
Why would
past
you think
been.
they're paying attention to us?
Ed, we've got to take the shot.
Fine.
Okay, we've
Have
got to
a good
go
time.
and we've got to
Have
speak
a good
to it.
time.
Thank you.
We passed a resolution last time reinstating our position. So that stands for itself. That we reaffirm the original resolution that we still oppose, even more so after the first one. So that should be plain and simple.
Okay, just want to give you the update, May 9th. Please be there if you can.
Next item, single-use plastics, Mayor Davey.
So it sounds like we're moving in the right direction with plastic bags with our big, I'll call them our big box stores. I've been talking to people in the chamber, I've been talking to smaller businesses. They're starting to see the move away. But, I was at a few events over the weekend, and what I realized was, and these were groups that are very mindful of our use of plastics, and yet they're using plastic cups, they're using plastic forks, plastic plates. And I was really happy to see one of our members who's very much into the environment came to an event and he brought his own cup. And I saw something in the news over the weekend about, I think it was the state of New York that bans they just banned plastic bags. But there's a movement among municipalities and states to start banning single-use plastics. And what I would like to see us do, and again, Michelle mentioned styrofoam. I think that's something that we're not really paying attention to, but I would like us to start considering moving in that direction and getting a little more aggressive. We've sort of been sitting back waiting for Coral Gables to resolve their situation, but I think it's time. If we're really going to be at the forefront of this, we should be. We should be leading. We should be making decisions and taking action that limits the use of plastics in our community.
Mayor, can I give you an update on the litigation?
Sure.
And I also the Vice Mayor had asked me a question earlier. I can give her an update just on the same topic real briefly. So the Retail Federation filed a notice of pendency and request for ruling.
DCA?
The third DCA. So they're really pushing to get a ruling from the third DCA. That was filed last month. There have been cities that have started to lose their patience in waiting for the decision and have started to act. And the Vice Mayor asked me today about it. Bal Harbor is one of those cities that
That's what I saw,
just
actually, I
recently passed it in the last couple of weeks. So I just want to give you, there are examples of that. Now theirs is not in effect yet, but we'll see what happens there. So just to give you a perspective, as you know, just for the benefit of everyone, the Coral Gables decision that was rendered by the trial court found that the plastic bags and styrofoam preemptions were unconstitutional, and they're being appealed. So there is state legislation. I don't think it's really going anywhere, from what I understand on a lot of this, to try to lift the preemption. But that's kind of the law of the land right now, to give you the spectrum. And I'm here to answer any questions on it. So.
I would just like to see what opportunities we have to start. I mean, my first move would not be to legislate it away. I'd like to start working like with Winn-Dixie, taking those steps. I'd like to work with our businesses to get them to move in that. What's that?
That you can do.
Yeah, I think that we can start doing. But I would also like to see, I mean, my goal would be at some point for us to say, yeah, we can't have balloons. I hate balloons. I don't think balloons. No, I do.
Love balloons.
I know kids love balloons, and I'm sorry, they're bad for the environment. And so we need to pay for balloons. So
They have balloons that melt when they go into the water.
is that right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's
So that
Well, as opposed to when they go in otherwise. I went to a part, wasn't invited, but I saw a party at the yacht club one time that probably had, like, no joke, there were thousands
Right.
of forest green balloons. They created a magical forest made of balloons. The entire parking lot, all the yacht club grounds after the party were littered with
These
popped
balloons.
green balloons. How many manatees thought they were a leaf?
right.
once they made their way into the canal.
What's that?
And
Yeah,
the bay.
they're finding too much.
And turtles.
Turtles, manatees, everything is just the dolphin. They just found a baby dolphin here that swallowed plastic
Is there
bags.
something you would like to take action on, or?
Well, I mean, I just want to talk about it. I think I've got consensus, but I think I'd like some ideas, frankly. I mean, I'm going to start going out and talking to these businesses and saying, hey, can we, how can you, what can you do? Because it is at the corporate level. As you saw with the Winn-Dixie people, there's different departments for real estate and the bags. So it may be, well, it really, that's what it is. So CVS, that's somebody I need to talk to. And then talking to other businesses, they've been mindful of it. They are considering it, but it's going to be restaurants moving away from plastics and going to more paper-based containers when you take them out. I mean, you think about how much plastic we get. It's too much, and we need to do what we can on this island to stop that. You know, we talk about resiliency and what's that?
I like the grassroots.
Yeah.
Next is like
Yeah.
CVS
and
and
we-
7-Eleven and then Sir Pizza and start talking to these guys,
Right.
you know?
I also think our community is starting to demand this.
Right.
And so the businesses are listening. There's some really active, environmentally friendly people in this community, and if we can support them and engage them, I think once, if people aren't soliciting or going to these businesses because they're not following the rules they want, that's going to change things probably faster than
than we could.
anything we
So
can
maybe
do.
maybe we work with them to figure out what they want us to do and what proposals we can go and make. You know, what are the materials that they should be using?
And we did pass a resolution 2 years ago, or when Coral Gables passed their ban, we passed a resolution asking vendors and restaurants, whatever, within the village to voluntarily switch. And some places did. The Golden Hog did. I think Sir Pizza changed some of their packaging. And maybe at that time, we sent it out with a cover letter. Maybe it's time to recirculate it.
That's a good idea.
I think
And
this is,
that work is already done.
Right.
I think it's a great opportunity to partner up with the Chamber of Commerce because this is what they want to do as well. And they also have these groups as members, so they can be very effective and see how we can work together with them in order to, get these businesses to get on
Why don't
board.
maybe we meet with the advocacy group and talk to them first?
I'll set that up for you.
All right, cool. Let's do that.
All right.
All right, perfect. Let's move on.
Next item, asset address verification, Vice Mayor McCormick.
Oh, so this is just to follow up on, it was mentioned in the presentation, the address verification program that is in place now is a one-year contract. The contract that we signed with Miami-Dade County Public Schools was 1 year with an option to renew for 2 years. And it is up, I think, the end of June 30th. So I've asked Chad, we'll bring it back and have it hopefully with a resolution at our next meeting so that if it is the will of council for that program to continue, that same employee can stay employed without having to let her go and look for someone else or hope that she's still there if there's a lapse in time. But I wanted to just mention it today so that if you had questions or concerns or things, we could maybe start talking about it.
Just
Ignacio?
one question. I think during the presentation, I saw that if the contract gets renewed, it's for 2 years.
So
Can it be
that
one?
was a question that I had. It was a little vague in the contract, and Chad and I both felt that we could renew for one and have it come before us again. It does not. I don't think the school district is going to hold our feet to the fire and say, no, you have to sign up for 2 years. And my recollection when we discussed this at the last council that approved the initial contract was that we didn't see this as something that was going to necessarily need to be a permanent position that we fund at the school district. But that what we felt at the time was that it was an important enough issue to put the money to see if all these rumors were true, and 53 people in a 1 year sweep, I think, of 3 grades strikes me as significant enough to continue it. And the hope was that with really strict enforcement, that the word would get out that this is not something worth trying. And that after a few years of very strict enforcement, that maybe enough people would know you really don't do it. That coupled with the property appraiser's office working on the homestead cracking down on homestead violations. Hopefully, we can sort of nip this in the bud while the school program is still really in its infancy.
I like it. I just would like that flexibility of year to year.
It's already in the budget.
I don't know if it's in the budget for continuing.
So it's part of the annual operating budget, so the appropriation would need to happen every year.
But the renewal comes before we approve the budget.
So what would you recommend? You want to make a motion, or I'll make a motion for you?
Today, we just need to discuss it. I'll bring it back as a resolution at the next meeting.
But then you have to wait for a second resolution.
Just one for a resolution.
Okay.
So
I support it.
And I want to make sure that there was some language in the contract when Chad and I looked at it that said, that both parties had to be in agreement on the terms. So I'd like to bring it back next time, really fully cooked. The school district will likely, they've agreed that they will, and I'm sure they will because they always accommodate us. They would like to be here in case anyone has questions, and so it'll come back then.
Can you remind me, Allison, I know we're paying about $50,000.
I think it's
35?
Yeah.
35? Okay, so I'm wrong already. About 35,000, and we're paying for part of a full-time employee's salary, or is it somebody that
She's
only
part-time.
comes for this? She's part-time?
She's part-time. We pay the whole thing.
Okay.
What I will say is we kind of got a bargain this time because with it being the initial crackdown and with the unfortunate timing of it, with when we approved the funds, when she was hired, all of this verification this year happened during the school year. So if you can imagine the tremendous disruption to the children who were removed, the children who were placed in, and then the schools where the kids came from, the schools where the kids went to. So it used a tremendous amount of resources beyond this one employee. I know there were people who sort of appealed, they had an appeals process, so it involved legal staff at the school district. We clearly got our money's worth this year, above and beyond what we paid for.
Having said that's what they should be doing, we know that. So
I
I
agree.
can't say that necessarily.
You don't have to cry over it, but it wasn't only us, and it wasn't only us funding it, and I do not think that it is our job to take on the role of what the school district should be doing, but our ask was above and beyond what they did anywhere else.
Which I totally understand and support. I'm not suggesting that. What I was wondering is if we could maybe think about what is the cutoff of when it wouldn't necessarily make sense to do it anymore, or does it make sense to do it every 3 years or something when it goes below a certain number? That's going to be a problem if we're fully funding a person, because the person goes away.
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer to this, but that would be what I was thinking of is, once the problem's gone, or if it goes down to a low level that they can manage, what is that number that they then can make that promise, we can handle it at this point?
And I would say that maybe that's something that we ask even the Education Advisory Board to monitor. Like, they have taken upon themselves to monitor the way that enrollment trends are because of questions with, do we need more seats in middle school? Do we need more seats in high school? That kind of thing. That maybe if we commit ourselves to doing a second year and then ask them to report back to us, what do they see in terms of the need going forward?
I guess the only thing that I would ask as an extra with the negotiation with the school board is, can you give us a number that when it gets to this number that you can absorb this and you can do it at
Certainly
that
I
level?
could ask.
So, okay, that's it.
Next item, Mayor, is zoning ordinance review. Councilmember Moss.
Thank you. This is something that's been around for a while. We're working on it. Something that I think Ed has brought up when he was on his previous council. It's something that I brought up when Ed was not here, and then when Ed is back, he brought it up again. So there's items in the zoning code that we need to take a look at. I've been working on this a little bit, but staff had their charge to give us a review of our code where we have different issues going on. So I've met with them. I gave them a little bit of some ideas for myself. They came up with a 19-page table that separates it into 4 categories: scrivener's errors, text clarifications, new recommendations, and revisions that we probably would need to be looking at. Speaking to our manager, I think what we're going to need to do is focus on some areas of more importance to start off. We will need to use some resources inside our administration in order to get some of these things done. So what I would like to do is bring this up to see if I have consensus to bring this as a higher priority. I think that for me, this is one of the highest priorities I think that we need to be looking at because development is going on, and we need to be looking at the resiliencies, the sustainabilities, the design quality and characteristics, and also just common sense. There's things in there that just doesn't make any sense. Some of the things is, allowing options for owners to build higher than the base flood elevation that we restrict them at as an option. While maintaining still the characteristics that we're looking for in Key Biscayne, promoting energy reduction, reducing water runoff and water consumption, removing some of the nonsense requirements that, putting 2 fences against each other just doesn't make any sense. Or, from my own experience in my own house, I had to put a retaining wall because my lot was lower than my neighbor's lot. It didn't make any sense to me because I didn't, I basically met the same level. So some of these things just don't make sense. And also, there's areas that I think we can use improvement to add a little bit more ability for designers to bring in different type of characteristics into our designs instead of limiting people to these kind of boxy modern homes, which our code is really kind of, when you start designing within the code, you end up with these boxes. Sometimes you can put some sloped roofs on them, or but a lot of times they come out almost looking the same every time. So I think there can be some minor adjustments to it, not changing anything major, that would allow a little bit more differentiation. And but the ask is basically talking to the manager. She's got a lot on her plate. She's got some major things when it comes to library buying, looking at the entry block. We have the undergrounding. Constantly, ultra stuff. I mean, all this stuff is building up like crazy, and I want to see if we want to make this a high priority, so she can give me some resources that I can, work with her to come back and, start recommending changes. It might not be all at once because there's 19 pages here. I think it's going to be focused on a couple of things at a time, and we bring them in and we can discuss them. We'll have public input while we're discussing this. This won't be all done behind the scenes or anything like that. And then we bring them up and see what is easy to do and what is not.
Just one question, and God knows I don't want another Zork or Zorb or whatever we call it. Does it make sense? I mean, does it make sense to do it as just in chunks, or does it make sense to do the whole thing at once so it's comprehensive and everything works? I'm asking as a.
Well, my position is that try to do some of this stuff years ago. And the reason we didn't elevate the houses, even though this is you remember the easiest way to combat rising flood and everything else, was a bunch of architects came and said, the houses won't look good. So therefore, if they don't look good, we can't do it. And then that's why, that's why I got overruled, and we didn't decide not to do it. So we built all these new houses all these years, almost 6 years, at the lower level. Now, of course, now it's a 10-foot level. Now they've raised the FEMA, the base flood, to 11, so they're 1 foot below. I'm sure within a couple of years it'll be 12. You know what's going to happen all of a sudden? They're going to say the insurance, when you're below BFE, you're going to pay a huge amount of insurance, and we basically prohibited these people from building up. That's right. It's absurd. And so, yeah, we should do, yes. The answer is, yes, there's so many things there that to wait to get it all done takes too long. They're the easy things to pick, the low-hanging fruit. What we're talking about, you get it done very quickly, and then move on to the other things and make it progressive. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah.
Are you looking for a motion? I'd like to make a motion. First of all, thank you for all the work you've done.
Before you finish, let me one more thing. I also brought up, which goes back to what I think Brett is, I guess the first meeting since when I got reelected, was the unnecessary regulations which are very costly and accomplish nothing. And building and zoning is one of the things where we have a regulation, you have to have a threshold inspector. We're the only village, the only city that has residential threshold inspectors. But we don't really care because the person pays for his building it, so it costs them the $5,000, $6,000. It's absurd. I don't know if you know what threshold inspector is, but
I understand.
just believe me, it's not necessary. No one else has it.
I move that, that you proceed with this work. I'm sure that I always looked without knowing as much as you do, that Coral Gables has always been like the star, perhaps excessively so, but still they have a great community where we can learn something from it. But I think it's great work that you've done, and I'll make a motion that you continue with it, coordinated with the manager.
And I just want to clarify, these are mostly minor stuff, I mean, we're not going and like, hey, we're going to completely change the code. It's just like, hey, can we give the option for people to raise their first floor? Maybe the height doesn't change. Maybe some things, there's different things that will still be, but it's like, but maybe the front door has to be maintained at the same level. So we'll be very, conscious about how to keep it still with that same characteristics, but at the same time, responding to these important things.
Councilmember Petros.
In order to give it a little structure, as you break it up, is there a way to have categories so that we can look at these different categories within the zoning, and then when you bring it forth, we'll have an understanding?
Yeah, we could either do it by single-family homes is the first one, and we just focus on single-family homes.
Within single-family homes, you can have categories.
You could have categories.
You can break it as small as you want, just because this is an area I don't have knowledge in, and I'd want to be able to study it so that I have a good opinion.
May I have a second?
Go for it and do it.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Objections? Motion carries. Next item is the website. Councilmember Petros.
I brought up the website because I think it would be a good idea, and hopefully you guys agree, to update our website.
Agreed.
And one of the things that came up with Ultra, actually, and I'll thank Jenny and Andrea, is the communication that came out was one of the things that our community felt very good about. And Jenny really took the lead on this, and her job description when she came on as clerk includes being our director of communications. So I think this is an area, and when we did our evaluation talk, we talked about communication and the idea of having some defined projects to look at. So I'd like to ask two things. One is that we ask Jenny to look at what it may cost to do a revamped website and some ideas that she might have of how that could look. And then we can look at those things and we can hear what the cost is. That can dovetail into our strategic planning on whether we want to budget that for next year. And then also there is somebody who monitors and pushes out information on our website. And that person's currently sitting under the manager in the organizational chart. And I think it would be a good idea to discuss to move it onto the clerk. So I don't know what's required to do that, Chad. I'm not sure.
Basically terminate the position under the manager and move it and create it under the clerk.
I'm not sure it was ever specifically under.
I mean, clearly, you create a position underneath the village clerk's office, and it would be underneath her budget.
Just shift the person.
And
we can just shift the person over. So those are the two things that I'm asking what your opinion is.
I think it's great. No, I think it's yeah, let's go. Do it.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you want to bring this up at the strategic planning, or?
I think I'd like, first of all, I'd like, Jenny, do you have any thoughts or comments on
Structurally, the discussions that we had was that the website consultant, obviously I would have issues in trying to move forward anything relating to communications, because even throughout the Ultra event, I relied on the website consultant to help me in pushing out the information. So my office of two wouldn't be able to absorb, that additional task. So if the will of the council would be to transfer over the consultant.
The consultant and is the consultant different than the information pusher, rather?
Same.
Same. And it is now. That's what we'll put it in the org chart. Do you feel that's sufficient to the task? Like, do you feel that's sufficient staffing to the task? Is there currently any additional parts that go into that?
We can always do more, right? We can always improve. If the council would give me the opportunity, since the budget workshop is right around the corner, a strategic planning session, which we'll be talking about soon, if you can give me the opportunity to put something together that I can possibly present this year, it would remain the same, and then possibly next year, if the council would like to see more communications, via other platforms, if you will. If you could just give me the opportunity to analyze that and come back to you.
Yes, please, because I think thinking back to watching you in action during Irma, the communication was amazing, but you were very well supported, and everyone that I saw working with you was really busy. And I understand that was in like a crisis mode, but if we are constantly talking up here about kind of that level of communication, it strikes me that
it's a team effort. If you're using Hurricane Irma as an example, I had a team of 4 to 5, so for Ultra I had 2, but we can improve on that. How we plan in advance and having some type of communications plan, that was the first time, that type of communication hit the community, which I think was very successful because we increased our followers. So we could always improve on it and maybe possibly, and I don't want to speak yet, use less resources, but it's definitely a team effort as far as the clerk's office and the administration, because I'm as good as the information I'm fed. If I'm not fed the information, I can't push it out. So, but if you can give me the opportunity to come back to you, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think my first ask would be the website. I think that's critical.
Also, I can
of revamping the website, which is a defined project of, okay, what would that take, and what do you see out there in other communities that we would like to replicate?
And I also would, team effort, I would have to work with administration, because 80 to 90% of the information on there is administration's information. So they have to be comfortable with the way it sits. I could recommend to you, but I would have to coordinate and come up with something that the administration would be comfortable with, that we can possibly together present, because I could present something, but if, let's say the building permit software, it's the way it looks or it's presented and it doesn't sit well, it's a team effort. But definitely I'll come back.
How much time would you like to look at revamping the website and what that would cost and the resources it would take? Is it 2 meetings?
I think for the budget workshop, we have to have an idea of what this can possibly cost us, because we have to have a number, right? An estimate of what it could cost. That this would definitely be something we go out to bid on. There has to be an agreed upon scope. So I can come up with something, a draft.
Maybe levels
RFP,
too?
A draft RFP that you can look at, where you can actually see what the scope of the website could be, because I'll defer to the manager, but I believe that I would have to come back with some type of, there's procurement.
Maybe before we do the RFP, I'm thinking that we can just get some information, and I don't know if the next meeting's too soon or not, but if you can go find out, you and I looked at Miami Beach and we thought that looked nice. I have no idea what Miami Beach's new website cost, but if you can find out what other communities have paid for their recent websites.
Definitely. I can do a survey of other communities and what they have presented to the council, and then get a sense of the council of what type of website you're looking for.
And not for nothing, to this whole argument, the discussion we have about the talent in this community. There are a lot of web designers here, and I think there are people who would be good and would be willing to work on this potentially. So, I mean, I think there's opportunities there. I would prefer to give the work to somebody in the community if we can do that. I mean, honestly, obviously we'd need to RFP it, but just so you're aware, and there may be people willing to talk to you about their ideas on web design before we go out.
Yeah, and if anyone's watching now and has ideas, if they use the website and know what they don't like about it, and they happen to be a web designer.
Absolutely.
Katie, I'm make sure I understand the scope of what you're suggesting. It's just on the website.
Just in the, two things, just the website coming back to give us an idea of what we could do to revamp our website, cost, time frame, look. Then the second part is to move this person that handles our web services, which is an outside consultant. Outside consultant. She's been working in the village for many years, but she currently on the organization chart sits under the manager, but we would move her over under the clerk because she's part of communication and our clerk.
Right, but this is why I wanted to make sure you and I don't have a misunderstanding. I have.
And that doesn't need to happen tonight. We can have a discussion about it.
But it's important that you understand at least where I'm coming from.
Okay.
And you've heard me talk about this and in private meetings with that. And the Ultra incident showed how bad an image we have, unfortunately, or they have managed our image. And I've been advocating to hiring a communications person, which is not the same thing as a web designer, to have a proactive, and the manager has to assume some of that responsibility herself and us individually to communicate the truth about Key Biscayne. You know, the spoil, what is it, beach bums on golf carts that were thrown at us on our first fight on Ultra. It's unfortunately an image that we've been trying to fight back on this thing. And so we need a proactive campaign of projecting our image other than just websites and all of that.
And we can have that discussion too. That's different than this. But
That's what I meant.
One point
it is
that you
different.
made, though, is that the way that it sits right now, our clerk is our director of communications. So if we're going to look at these images, that's the office that it currently sits under. We can change that if we need to evolve. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to, and I don't want to drag out this debate, this talk too much, but I just want to tell you what I feel. I do have concern that our director of communications is in our clerk's office. I mean, in the end of the day, if our website is not good, that should be the responsibility of our manager who's managing the whole, is responsible for everything. And on top of that, our clerk does not work for the manager, right? Our manager can't go and start directing our clerk what they need to be doing and what they can't be doing. I think it's better to have our manager to be in full control with including our website and communications. Now, our clerk can be part of the communications, but it should be really the communications from this council, from this area of how that communicates to, I think, our public from our standpoint. But from an administration standpoint, I think it should be that the manager is responsible for all of this. And if something goes bad, it's the manager's fault for going bad. And at the end of the day, they're going to start pointing fingers and, there's no control. So, in business, it's the same way. I mean, the CEO is responsible for everything. You can't just say, you know what, but the whole communication section, we're just going to give it to somebody else you have no control over, and we're going to try to manage that ourselves. I don't think it's the best thing to be doing.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm just looking at you because you're over here.
Because
it's just like a force of habit.
No. I mean, there is.
I know.
There has to be a proactive campaign that falls under the person who knows what's going on.
I agree, and I think that we can have more conversation. I don't think we need to do it right now, but I'm just going to tell you where I feel with this, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about this. But I'm a big advocate that the CEO or the manager of a municipality should be in control with all the management activities, and I don't know if we should take that out. And I think that we can use the communication over here for the board stuff. So,
and I think maybe this needs a bigger conversation because
That's why I wanted to
the message of our council should be going through the clerk.
Of the council, for sure. She can do the communications of councils.
So, but some of this stuff overlaps a lot, so we need to have a conversation on that. For now, can we task her with the website? Are you
For
comfortable
now,
with
let's
that?
do that,
Okay.
and then we have a bigger conversation about this.
Okay.
That's fine.
Next item, Parks Open Space Board, Councilmember Petros.
I'm bringing this up, we kind of hashed some of it out, and I think the whole point is that we're really just renaming our previous Land Acquisition Committee to a Parks and Open Space Board, which doesn't require, there was some discussion about sunsetting land acquisition and then creating a new board. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear. We can just change the name, and then at the next meeting, there's 3 vacancies. Again, anybody listening who wants to be on this board dealing with land acquisition, submit names. I have 3 names that I circulated, and maybe I'll recirculate?
Yeah, recirculate.
Okay.
Let's recirculate. In the other direction.
Are we sending out the constant contact to
Yeah,
people who want
to
to
let people
apply?
know.
Yes, if you could let people know about these openings, I guess. Yeah, what?
The issue I have with advertising is because I don't know if the scope of the board is going to change. When I advertise the boards, I need to give the purpose of what the board will be doing. If the ordinance is not going to come back for first or second reading to revise in any way, then I will go.
I think that we should bring it back just for one point, and I wanted to just say is that one of the parts of the jurisdiction, and I think we should clarify this, is to, it says review the village's previous efforts towards land acquisition, including but not limited to the 2020 vision plan and the 2007 EAR, the evaluation appraisal report. And do you want to, I mean, it seems outdated. You guys are moving to the 2040 plan now, and the EAR, there's already been an EAR since then.
Chad, I'm sorry. I brought this up before, and I'm glad that you clarified it. We just complicate things. I remember the spirit and the motion was to change the name. Because, again, I said it before, because it was more PR bounds, and also because that's the state of the art now in terms of naming. And all of a sudden it became a new resolution, everybody giving feed. What you said is exactly what I thought we had done before. And it can be very plainly advertised, vacancies for this board named Open Space, parenthesis, formerly known as Land Acquisition Board, please send in your resumes. I think that's the way we should do it, and get the 3 names and other names and get those 3 vacancies appointed. We have excellent people
Can
there.
you do it that way, Jenny? Just formerly known as, and then the scope is the same? Sure. The only additional component, it's still analyzing land in the interest of the priorities of the community that will align. I get your point, what you said, Chad, because they have to work with the new strategic plan that's coming, or the vision that's coming through the committee that you're chairing, or the board, excuse me.
Not chairing.
And that is when we expanded.
Liaison.
Did this maybe slip through the cracks, though, when we did our thorough board reviews and looked at all the ordinances and tried to clean everything up, that if there is still dated language in there, not related to the scope of their work, but this, should we bring it back now in the spirit of we've just cleaned them all up, and take out the 2007 EAR and the 2020, and maybe just simply change the language to be in whatever the word would be, like to work in harmony with, that's not the right word, but the current strategic plan or vision plan, and leave it at that, so that nobody ever has to go back. To your point earlier today, that you said that we over lawyer everything, it sounds like that this original document was perhaps, to use your term, over lawyered and now has out of date stuff. And since we've worked so hard to bring all of them up to date, could we bring that back next time, just more generic, not so specific with out of date documents, and then we can just hopefully be finished with our board resolution.
But we can do that after we make.
Yeah,
we
separate
can do-
from that.
Because we're holding things up, and it
No,
creates
no.
confusion. Ignacio's early concern were very based on also comparing the two. It gets so perfect that we're stumbling all over ourselves.
I understand, and I
So
don't
the
think
idea-
we have to hold up the
Yeah, the
advertisement.
process, advertising
but
and get the appointments and then.
To do the same
that.
simultaneously, we do that, we work on the appointments, and in the meantime, Chad, can you bring back for next time the
We can just bring a
revised?
cleanup. I think it could be parallel paths.
Yeah, I think so too.
Complicated.
Perfect.
So we can do both at the next meeting, and you can advertise?
By the end of the week, I'll have
right.
the
And
advertisement.
then also, we
Fantastic.
need, for the landscape committee as
about
well.
to bring it up,
Let's
yeah.
just get that done too. Put that advertising out. We need people for the May 21st so I can appoint, or I can nominate for appointment.
Next item, texting while driving, Councilmember Petros.
All right, real quickly, I wanted to report that the bill has gone off both the House and the Senate floors. It's been approved, so it's going to the governor's office to be signed into a law. And it is, what is being looked at is a texting ban as a primary offense in the whole state, and then a full handheld ban in school and construction zones. And hopefully that means that ultimately we'll get to a full handheld ban. It may not be next year, but maybe the following. And so there's been a lot of work by our resident, Debbie Wanenkoff, has gone up for every single subcommittee and committee meeting, and she's spoken personally. And I really believe those personal stories make a difference. So hats off to her.
And hers is powerful.
Very nice.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Next item, permit impact fees, Councilmember Laredo.
Well, when we had that difficult decision, there was a close call last time on a change. We with our, let me make sure, I didn't bring it up before because I wanted to make sure legally I wasn't making, we have enhanced value. And we'll have to have a whole argument again, about the covenants and all of that people should know, caveat emptor. Well, we made the decision. I think we all are trying to enhance a sense of social responsibility with our citizens. And I almost brought up at that vote that they should consider making a contribution, if not necessarily for our village budget, but certainly to stuff like the community foundation, because it's the right thing to do, because we have just given them an enhanced value on this, which is okay. But at that time, I felt very careful not to mess up that heated day. But I think we have to, whether we call it impact fees or when they draft whatever agreement they will as a consequence of our vote, that they should be told. I have communicated through third parties that they should look at this as the right thing to do, as a community thing to do. It's a great investment. It's a great business decision. This issue of corporate social responsibility was fought on for many, many years until the corporate world realized that it was actually very good for business, and it's good. The better this community gets, the better their property values are. So I think, and actually when you talked about the work that you have been doing, I don't know how to put it in there or to make a public appeal to the property owners and those who are going to benefit in this particular case, that, we have a sense of contributing. And I don't know where to take it from there other than to see if we have a sense of us about what I'm trying to do. And, one way to become efficient is either to also reduce costs or expenses, but also increase revenues. And that would be revenues if we wanted to go that way. But also the experiences that I'm having here with all these community centers of committees, not the community center, and through the foundation, et cetera, they can use the money to do a lot of good things. So I don't know how to get it accomplished, but I think as a philosophy, we should execute something to that effect.
Councilmember Moss.
I completely agree with you. I think impact fees are something that we should look at because there are impacts when somebody builds a larger house, impact on traffic, schools, police, fire. I mean, all this stuff. I mean, we don't need to go crazy about it, but we can see where there are real impacts where we need to have funds in order to address certain situations. So I think that is something that we can look at to see if it's even possible to do it. It seems like most of the real development is going to be in the single-family homes, but there will be some major developments if, certain retail, commercial areas get redeveloped, or some of the properties sunrise if some of the larger, turn into a little bit larger buildings. That could affect it. But other than that, I mean, I think it's a good idea to explore it and see what we can come up with.
And we have a case right now in our hands where we've created, against significant opposition, and our council itself was divided 4-3, because it's a very difficult call, very difficult, to the rezoning of that 220, that they acutely divided into 220 and 220, whatever. That should be a particular case right now that we should try to, with your help, to find a creative way to it certainly would be wonderful if they volunteered to do it. But that hasn't worked so far.
So what's the plan? What are you asking for? You want
Do we impact fees, if that's the way to go, but do it right away, or what you suggest that we can do?
Well, adopting impact fees is 100% legal to do. You have to figure out which facilities, parks, police, fire, there's a range of different types. And then generally what you do is you adopt it, and the fee is based upon the difference. Like if you're knocking down an existing home, it's the difference in the additional square footage that they pay the fee. And then those fees are used to acquire parks or help to acquire another fire truck or whatever it may be. So that's something, if you want to direct the manager, we can work with the manager to bring back.
Can we do it within the scope of this particular property time frame?
I mean,
I don't see why not.
It depends on how fast you can do it. Because
Correct.
if they have a site plan already in, it might not
It
be.
really usually
I spoke to him so that excuse me for interrupting you, at the last meeting, and he, out of one little caution, I didn't bring it up because I didn't want anybody to appeal like it was a condition.
Sure.
But I think we ought to move because, that was a particular
Instance.
property where, we created.
We didn't rezone anything.
Exactly. Whatever you believe is fine, Ed, but we created value, and impact fees are impacts at that community. There are smaller houses in that area that we're not very happy with because that's probably going to be a bigger house and 2 lots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to rehash what we voted on last time, but to get some benefit.
A lot of times it's done by square footage. I mean, that's how it's mostly done. So based on the square footage that you have, the increase in square footage, you would pay an impact fee on that.
Yeah.
And that can go towards, like you said, like parking and bike lanes and things like that.
By
that we
law,
wanna bring
it's
in.
paid at building permit, so there's still time.
There's
It's
still
paid at
time.
building permit. Okay, good. So it's not a site plan, but it's a building
So
permit.
is that okay? Something you all support? So
I think we should look at it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring something back. Thank you.
Just one more, it won't take long. It's the Village Strategic Planning Session meeting location. I did, not only the date, I think I have the consensus of council for May 18th. Is that correct?
I can't make it.
Let me see.
I just said that. I'm kidding. I'm
Funny.
It's kind of funny.
May 18th.
Saturday, May.
When is the 4th of July
Okay, what
party?
do you need for us? May 17th. So
Oh, should we do it too early?
let's just continue from the party.
Just keep going.
At midnight, we'll start the strategic workshop. Boom.
I've looked at two off-island facilities, one on island, and I would like the consensus of council. I've
Whatever's cheapest.
well, JW Marriott, Mayfair, and the Ritz on the Key.
JW Marriott and
Do the
Brickell?
Ritz. Why?
JW
what's
Marriott
the-
and Brickell?
Yeah, let's keep it in-house.
yes,
Yeah,
Why don't we really keep it in-house?
I move for the Ritz
let's
in Key Biscayne. That is our neighbor. It allows. It's a significant taxpayer. They treat us very well, and gives access to people who live in the island. Originally, hopefully down the road in a year or two, when we get a little more, we can do one really off. Go somewhere, either Key Largo or something, but between Brickell and...
I mean, like Argentina or something.
There's probably Argentina, but between Brickell and here, I think the Ritz-Carlton is the best. So I make it a motion, if that's necessary, for the 18th at the Ritz-Carlton Key Biscayne.
May I have a second?
Second.
All those in,
Just
on
a
the
Saturday.
weekend.
Just a Saturday.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Objections? Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Ooh, you got a motion to...
Oh.
So you